The bride, Emily, graduated from junior high school with great grades. A junior high school graduate. Oh no, I thought to myself. I regretted not checking her profile introduction sooner. And then I saw Emily's weak spot. It was just about to slip out of my mother-in-law's mouth when our eyes met. I'm Emily, now 28 years old. My husband, Mark, who is 2 years older than me, and I are in the middle of our wedding. My mother-in-law was staring at me with a cold look in her eyes. I could feel her gaze all over me. Honestly, I can't stand my mother-in-law. Mark is a doctor. We met through work, hit it off, and got married. It's the usual story of how people fall in love. But at our first meeting, Mark's mom started criticizing me right away. Does she work for a proper company? If you're going to pick someone, pick a doctor or at least a registered nurse. An assistant nurse isn't good enough. A girl working at a regular company, she must have tricked you, Mark. Those were the first words she said to me. That's rude, I said. I'm the one who fell in love and asked her to marry me, Mark said, upset. Do you really think you can have a marriage just from a fling? The difference in our education makes us different kinds of people. I was shocked. The idea that the difference in education makes people different kinds of people seemed to be my mother-in-law's favorite line. And her favorite thing to mention was, my husband graduated from Harvard. To her, a Harvard graduate was the ultimate, the king of the world, the strongest person on earth. Did you know that if you graduate from Harvard, you can get any job you want? But as you go lower in university rankings, there are jobs you just can't get. The worst is when you look at your future and see fewer choices, but at least you have the most options if you go to Harvard. By the way, what about your father? What? He finished high school, right? Oh my gosh, he only finished high school, she said, putting her hand over her mouth and laughing. Only finishing high school limits your options so much. When she brought up my dad's education, she didn't even ask about mine. Whether that was good or bad, my mother-in-law was just unbelievable. But I still loved Mark deeply. She was the problem, but we didn't have to live together. I figured we'd just get through the wedding and only see each other on holidays, or so I thought. I had no idea that a bomb was about to drop on our wedding day. It happened during the introductions of the bride and groom. Emily, the bride, graduated from junior high school with excellent grades. I could already tell my mother-in-law wouldn't let this go. Let's enjoy the party, she said. As soon as the food was served, she came over to us. So I heard. Yep, I'm sure you did. My mother-in-law flared her nostrils and glared at me. So she only finished junior high school. Is that even possible nowadays? Her words weren't surprising. When I first met Mark's parents, her education makes us different people idea was clear. I had expected something like this. Sorry, I said back. What did you say? My husband graduated from Harvard, and my son is a doctor. You don't even compare to our standards. Just finishing junior high is the lowest kind of education. I told you, education makes us different. Having someone like you join our family will ruin our genetic future. My mother-in-law's voice got louder. People around us started looking over, overhearing the conversation. Mark, worried about the situation, started to speak. Mom, what you don't know is Emily is. But before he could finish, the host stepped in, sensing the tension, and said, let's move on to the next part of the program. I nodded at the host, and with a smile, I urged my mother-in-law to go back to her seat. You don't need to tell me, junior high graduate, she sneered. After the ceremony, I'll talk to you about your divorce. I can't stand the thought of our family's future being ruined by someone like you. My mother-in-law turned and walked away, her dress swishing behind her. I'm sorry, Emily, Mark apologized. It's fine, you don't need to apologize, I said with a smile, watching my mother-in-law go back to her seat, looking pleased with herself. I whispered to myself, I'll make you understand, just wait and see. I smiled to myself. The party continued, and it was time for the congratulatory speeches. The host read out the greetings clearly. Congratulations on your marriage. Looking back, I could see her paying attention to every detail, even the little things. Public Relations Manager at Diamond Holdings, the host continued. My mother-in-law stood up proudly. I'm so happy to hear about your marriage. I've worked with your company for 6 years, and I'm grateful for all your help in our ads. Wishing you both a wonderful life. Director of Public Relations at McCoskey and Markson, the host added. My mother-in-law looked ready to take off running. We've received many other messages, but I'll just introduce the names, the host said. Then the names of big companies kept coming up. My mother-in-law looked shocked, almost like she was going to fall over after hearing all the congratulatory messages. She stormed over to our table, her face full of disbelief. Her husband, a Harvard graduate, tried to stop her, but she completely ignored him and practically screamed at me. "All right, what's going on here? You need to explain this to me." She was talking to me as if I were the bad guy. "What do you mean? What's going on?" I was about to argue back when my husband interrupted. "That's why I asked you earlier. Don't you know? Emily is in commercials for companies that don't use celebrities. She's a well-known actress in the industry." "What?" My mother-in-law blinked rapidly, clearly shocked by his words. She probably hadn't listened to anyone before, so this was the first time she was hearing it. Every time we met her, she would only talk about Harvard. She never understood anything about us. My husband, after all this time, is talking about something like this to his own mother. "How funny is this?" I said. "I met Emily because she was in a commercial for a beauty clinic," I explained. "I tried to tell you all this, but all you ever talked about was her parents' education." "Exactly," I sighed, taking a deep breath. "What's wrong with me finishing junior high school?" I asked. Then my mother-in-law, in a loud and unsteady voice, yelled, "I already told you, if you think about your future, going to Harvard gives you the most options." "All right, the future," I muttered. It's like she thought I hadn't considered my own future at all. I really needed to make her understand this. Taking a deep breath, I began. "So after university, you'd start looking for a job, right? And once you graduate at 22, you finally enter the workforce. If you want to go to Harvard for a career, that makes sense. But why does Harvard matter more than your future career?" I wanted to be an actress. I began working toward my dream right after graduating from junior high at 16. I didn't hesitate to decide what I wanted to do and started right away. I was able to start working and contributing to society early. Harvard is one of the best schools in the world, and it takes incredible effort to get there. But I worked hard too. I don't mean you criticizing me just because I only finished junior high. I'm not confident about my looks. That's why I fought with my acting skills, appearing in commercials and reenactment dramas to become the top actress in the field. I studied acting while working part-time jobs, even going to a movie theater with just a piece of bread. You have no idea how much effort and motivation it took to push through those uncertain times. I want you to stop looking down on me just because I'm a junior high graduate. It's true that junior high graduates have less formal education, but they get a head start in working. The determination and courage of a junior high graduate is what makes us proud and strong. It's wrong to judge people based on their education. Then I changed the subject. "You keep saying, 'My husband is, my husband is.' So what have you worked hard for?" "Oh well," she mumbled. "Well," I chuckled. "Shouldn't you say, I worked hard to raise my kids?" Although I meant it sarcastically, she looked at me like I had just helped her. "That's right," she proudly said. "I worked hard raising my children." There was a brief pause. "You didn't work hard," Mark intervened. This was based on what I'd heard from him. He explained, "You always said my father graduated from Harvard. Work hard. I expect more from you. You were tough on me, but didn't do much for me. I became a doctor, but I was always afraid I wouldn't meet your expectations. So when asked if you worked hard raising your children, you couldn't answer right away." "No," she mumbled. When people's weaknesses are exposed, they try to hide them with emotions. My mother-in-law was no exception. She screamed, losing all control. "Harvard. They're the best. Harvard is great." She was cornered and kept repeating the same thing like a broken record. Her loudness was irritating. "If you're going to act like that, it would be better if you stayed quiet." It was my father-in-law who finally stopped the noise. "You're not a Harvard graduate," he said, grabbing her by the shoulders and pulling her away from the table. "That's enough." "Hey," she yelled at him. He calmly stopped her and spoke gently. "You changed after we got married. When I first saw you working hard at the flower shop, you were so charming. You weren't a great cook, but you learned from me. I married you because I saw how dedicated you were. But after we married, all you said was, 'My husband is a Harvard graduate.' You even said it to our son. Do you have anything that's really your own?" Her eyes went wide, and she shouted at him, spitting as she spoke. "I was chosen by you, a Harvard graduate. That's my greatness. Harvard chose me. My father-in-law sighed, looking exhausted. I'm great because Harvard chose me. You care more about the name of Harvard than anything else, don't you? It seemed like he had made up his mind. Maybe this is how marriages fall apart. After sending Mark off to start his new life with his wife, it was time for the two of us to go our separate ways. When this wedding is over, we'll talk about our divorce. It's not about Mark and Emily. It's about us. Mother-in-law's body started shaking, and just as she was about to shout, my own mother burst into the scene. "Whoa, you people," she shouted loudly, standing between my mother-in-law and me. "Mom," I gasped in surprise. "How dare you act like this at my daughter's wedding?" She looked around the room. Everyone was watching silently. Since my mother-in-law had turned into a loud, shrieking mess, no one dared to speak up. Well, it's not surprising at a wedding. Who would want to fight in front of so many people? My mom seemed absolutely furious. "Today is the day to celebrate my daughter. Don't you think so?" my mother said, glaring at my father-in-law. "And her in-laws ruined the wedding. What do you think you're doing?" "My apologies, I'm so sorry," father-in-law said, lowering his head. But even his apology didn't calm my mom down. "Yes, it's true my daughter only graduated from junior high. I told her that if she wanted to study acting, she should finish high school and get to know the world a little better first. But Emily made up her mind, and since she said she wanted to pursue it, I've supported her as much as I could." Before my mother-in-law could speak, my mom cut her off. "You said Harvard is great because they're the smartest, right? Well, listen closely." Her voice was as loud as my mother-in-law's constant complaining. "My daughter taught herself French because she said it was necessary for acting. Now she's fluent. I don't think she should be looked down upon just because she graduated junior high, especially with her level of French. She's fluent in French. That's not easy, and most people would never expect it from someone like her. I did everything I could to improve my acting, and that's how I became fluent in French," my mother added. "So I want you to put aside your academic prejudice." The room erupted in applause. "We're leaving," I said. "I can't stand to watch this anymore." Father-in-law bowed to my mother and dragged my mother-in-law out of the hall. That's how our wedding ended. My friends congratulated me, and I was so happy to have worn a wedding dress. Afterwards, my father-in-law divorced my mother-in-law. She had spent too much time clinging to the name value of Harvard and feeling special because of it. She couldn't manage on her own anymore. She went back to her hometown far away. Even Mark, her son, was so hurt by her that he told her he wouldn't give her any money for living expenses, even though she raised him under the idea that Harvard is the best. I continued working as an actress in commercials. Sometimes I played a dentist, a fish shop manager, or a crime scene victim. I did all sorts of roles. Amidst all of this, I found out I was pregnant. In life, academic qualifications are important, but basing your whole value on them isn't. We should always work on improving ourselves. Tomorrow will be better than we were today. By working hard, we'll become even better than before. I gently place my hand on my growing belly. Tomorrow it will grow even bigger, and a happier day will come. When my mother-in-law was asked if I would be preparing the New Year's meal, she responded with a dramatic wave of her hands and a burst of laughter. "Absolutely not. That's impossible. My daughter-in-law can't cook to save her life," she exclaimed, proudly calling me the hopeless housewife who couldn't even manage a New Year's feast. She declared herself the sole authority in the kitchen. Her laughter wasn't just annoying. It felt like an outright insult. After enduring her derision for so long, I knew it was time to stand up for myself. My name is Natalie. I'm 29, and I got married last year. As a full-time housewife, I take pleasure in cooking, and thankfully, my husband isn't too picky. Anything edible seems to satisfy him. He's a kind man, and we live in a beautifully renovated home with a dream kitchen, complete with a large island. It should have been the perfect setup, but there's always been one persistent issue: my mother-in-law. She prides herself on her culinary skills and views me as a complete disappointment in the kitchen. Worse still, she doesn't keep her opinions to herself. Just the other day, while I was outside doing laundry, I overheard her gossiping loudly with the neighbor's wife. My daughter-in-law can't even cook properly. It's dreadful. I wonder about her upbringing. My poor son is so unfortunate to be stuck with her, she lamented. Each word felt like a thorn piercing through me. It was bad enough to endure her critiques of my cooking, but to hear her belittle my family was completely unacceptable. I realized I couldn't let this continue. It was time to take a stand. I've always held my parents in high regard, cherishing the countless lessons they taught me. Unfortunately, my mother-in-law never bothered to understand or appreciate those values. Instead, she chose to belittle me at every opportunity. Today was just another chapter in her ongoing series of critiques, her biting remarks echoing throughout the neighborhood. She doesn't even know how to season food properly. If I don't cook, there's no flavor at all. Why did my son have to marry someone like her? The neighbors chimed in, adding fuel to the fire with their jabs, questioning why she hadn't taught me herself. I muttered under my breath, enough is enough. I wish they would all just stop. My hand gripped a glass so tightly that it cracked. That evening, when my husband Daniel came home and my mother-in-law was conveniently in the shower, I saw my chance to finally let it all out. "Can't you do something about your mother?" I pleaded with Daniel as I helped him out of his jacket. "She's going around the neighborhood every day, making me out to be some hopeless cook." I opened up about my mother-in-law's relentless behavior, feeling it was necessary. Daniel isn't particularly close to his mother and genuinely cares about me, so I expected his support, maybe even hoped he would defend me or, at the very least, acknowledge the strain her words were causing. But his reaction took me by surprise. "Well, Mom has always been very particular about cooking," he said, scratching his head, looking genuinely troubled. The word particular hung in the air, so light yet laden with accusation. I almost fired back with a comment about her overpowering seasoning but held back, staring at him in disbelief, wondering if he truly understood the impact of his mother's words. "Come on, she's a good cook, right?" he asked nonchalantly. I was taken aback. "Well, I don't know much about good or bad cooking," he continued, "but please just try to get along with Mom. That's what a wife is supposed to do, isn't it?" With that, he left the room, leaving me stunned. Was this some kind of joke? Thoughts swirled in my mind. A good cook, a wife's duty. What does that even mean? Frustration surged within me. As much as I hated to admit it, my mother-in-law's cooking was far from delightful. She had monopolized the kitchen for the past year, ostensibly to spare me the effort, but I had never truly enjoyed her meals. She firmly believed that piling on the spices equated to better flavor. Daniel, raised on those robust tastes, always finished his plate without a word of complaint, but for me, eating such heavily spiced food was a daily struggle. Not only was it unpleasant, but I feared it might ruin my palate and wasn't great for my health. Each mealtime had become a silent battle where I forced myself to finish my portion out of fear of the consequences of leaving any behind. Alone in the quiet of our bedroom, I felt a wave of helplessness wash over me. I let out a heavy sigh. The real shock wasn't that Daniel failed to criticize his mother's cooking style. It was that he didn't seem to take my feelings seriously. In moments like these, I found myself missing the familiar, comforting meals from my parents' home. As the year drew to a close, so did the anticipation for the New Year's celebrations. This would be my first New Year since marrying into this family traditionally marked by a large gathering and a feast prepared by my mother-in-law. However, instead of joy, I felt a sense of dread as I pondered how to navigate familial expectations and the overpowering flavors that had become a regular part of my life. When Daniel casually mentioned that it was customary for the family to gather and enjoy the feast prepared by his mother for New Year's, I couldn't help but silently question the tradition. Outwardly, I managed only a half-hearted "oh." It seemed the relatives who eagerly attended each year had grown to love her cooking, or perhaps they had simply become accustomed to it. Despite feeling a twinge of sympathy for them, I couldn't shake the slight dread creeping in. Even though my mother-in-law frequently criticized my supposedly bland culinary skills, my parents had instilled a strong confidence in my cooking abilities. I secretly longed to cook for everyone and maybe even introduce some subtler flavors to Daniel's palate. With newfound resolve, I decided it was time to discuss the New Year's feast with my mother-in-law. As she bustled around the kitchen, pulling out large plates and pots, I seized the moment. "I'd like to help with the New Year's feast," I ventured, hoping to contribute to the upcoming celebration. But as she turned to face me, her expression was one of immediate dismissal. "Natalie, you can't even cook properly. How can you prepare food for the New Year's celebration? We'll have not just our family, but all the relatives over. You know that, right?" she retorted. "But I'm part of this family now. It's my duty as a wife to contribute," I insisted, determination rising within me. I argued, my voice laced with desperation, but she simply shook her head. "Do you want to create an awkward atmosphere for the New Year? Everyone comes expecting my cooking." We can't disappoint them. Please, if you understand, don't interfere." Frustration bubbled within me as I watched her dismiss my offer, turning back to her preparations. When New Year's Day arrived, the house quickly filled with about 20 relatives, more than I had anticipated, many of whom I hadn't seen since the wedding. As each guest arrived, I greeted them warmly, ushering them into the spacious dining room that had once overwhelmed me when I first moved in. The unusually large room buzzed with energy, perfectly suited for such gatherings. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law was already deep in conversation with the arriving relatives, taking center stage in the kitchen and being the heart of the celebration. During the festive preparations, a relative curiously asked, "By the way, is Natalie preparing the feast this year?" My mother-in-law waved her hands dismissively and laughed. "That's impossible. My daughter-in-law can't cook at all. She's a hopeless housewife who can't even manage a New Year's feast. I handle all the cooking around here," she declared. Her laughter sounded harsh and unwelcoming. It was not a light-hearted joke, but a pointed insult directed at me. At that moment, I reached my breaking point. "Mother-in-law, please let me prepare the New Year's feast this time. If it doesn't turn out well, you can always make a palate-cleansing dish," I suggested, breaking the tense silence that ensued. After a brief pause, the room began to buzz with whispers from the relatives. "Well, I certainly don't want a disappointing meal, but they say practice makes perfect, right?" my mother-in-law said, her tone conceited yet reluctantly acknowledging the shifting tide of opinion among the relatives in favor of giving me a chance. "All right, fine. If it doesn't work out, Freda can step in," she added. "Very well then, Nat, you can take the reins this year," she stated, her words tinged with reluctance. "But remember, I can always step in, ladies and gentlemen, so indulge this hopeless housewife's whims for once," she announced, her tone dripping with patronization. But with my heart swelling with pride and determination, I was ready to showcase my cooking skills to everyone. This was my chance to change their perceptions. I poured my heart into preparing the meal, and as I presented the beautifully arranged feast on a large platter, exclamations of admiration filled the room. "Wow, the meal turned out perfectly. It looks delicious. Well done, Natalie. This isn't something just anyone could pull off," they praised enthusiastically. Amidst their compliments, my mother-in-law, who had just returned from shopping for her so-called palate-cleansing dish, glanced at my spread. "It looks all right, I suppose, but it's probably bland," she remarked, emphasizing the word probably and clearly reluctant to acknowledge my success. Ignoring her comments, I focused on distributing paper plates and forks to the relatives, encouraging them to enjoy the meal. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law hurried back into the kitchen to prepare what she deemed necessary, keeping a watchful eye on us as if expecting to intervene at any moment. The relatives tentatively began sampling the dishes I had prepared. As I watched the guests sample the dishes, a murmur of approval began to build. My mother-in-law, not one to miss an opportunity, chuckled with apparent satisfaction and announced loudly, "See? I told you this is why she's the incompetent daughter-in-law." She turned to the crowd, adding, "You don't need to force yourselves. I'll prepare the palate-cleansing dish right away." Tone dripped with triumph, as if she expected to salvage what she assumed would be a culinary disaster. However, her satisfaction was quickly overshadowed by the sounds of genuine delight coming from the dining room. "This is the first time I've tasted New Year's food this delicious. It's like something from a fancy hotel. Natalie, where did you learn to cook like this?" exclaimed one of the relatives, their praise electrifying the atmosphere. Amidst the lively crowd, my mother-in-law stood momentarily stunned into silence by the unexpected approval. With everyone's attention now on me and none on her, I felt a surge of confidence. It was the perfect moment to reveal my background. "I grew up in a family that is deeply passionate about food," I began, my voice steady and clear. "My family owns a renowned French restaurant celebrated for its authentic cuisine and even recognized in the Michelin Guide. My father is the fifth generation overseeing culinary operations, and my mother, from a long lineage of chefs, supports him wholeheartedly. From a young age, I absorbed the art of cooking by observing my parents, honing my skills as they expertly crafted every dish. By the time when I was in upper elementary school, I earnestly learned the art of cooking from my parents. Although my brother is poised to inherit the restaurant, the culinary knowledge they passed down remains a deep source of pride for me." This revelation shifted the atmosphere in the room, further cementing my newfound respect among the relatives and leaving my mother-in-law to contemplate the unexpected turn of events. As the room buzzed with impressed voices, I felt a profound connection to my heritage, finally proud to share my true culinary roots. That's why I found it impossible to tolerate my mother-in-law's dismissive remarks and actions that undermined my skills. To her, dismissing my cooking was akin to denying my parents' legacy and the restaurant that had been a cornerstone of our family for generations. I had mentioned this before I got married, but it seemed to have fallen on deaf ears. My mother-in-law often treated me condescendingly, viewing me as just the daughter of a quaint countryside restaurant. Daniel, largely indifferent to culinary nuances, probably couldn't differentiate between a family-run establishment and authentic French cuisine. I sometimes questioned why I had married into this family, a thought I muttered under my breath as I turned to the sound of someone calling my name, meeting the gaze of several pairs of expectant eyes. "We have seconds. I want more." Despite the generous portions I had prepared, everything had been completely devoured. A wave of happiness washed over me, and I felt tears welling up. Receiving praise for my cooking should have felt routine, something I had known before marrying, yet over the past year, I seemed to have forgotten that sensation entirely. "Yes, I'll prepare more right away," I declared, renewed determination surging through me as I hurried out of the room. As I passed by my motionless mother-in-law, I noted that she had, after all, brought some ingredients, despite her earlier criticisms. "Mother-in-law, I'll use these ingredients," I announced, but she offered no reply. The groceries sat untouched in the kitchen as I reached into the supermarket bag to inspect its contents. Just then, 4 women entered the kitchen. Could you teach us how to cook too?" one of them asked, their faces eager with anticipation. I glanced up to see them lined up before me, their ages varying from my own to that of my mother-in-law's. This unexpected request bolstered my confidence. Here was a chance not just to share my heritage but also to foster a bond over our mutual love of cooking, transcending generational and family boundaries. It was a moment of validation, a chance to demonstrate the depth of my skills and the rich culinary legacy I carried. As I looked into their eyes, each gleamed with the same eager curiosity. "The food was amazing. We'd love to learn from you," they enthused. Hearing those words ignited something within me. I had never considered teaching cooking before, but witnessing their admiration awakened a newfound desire to share my knowledge. With a smile, I gladly agreed to teach them, and the room erupted with excitement. The group began animatedly discussing how they would impress their husbands by honing their cooking skills. Thus began an impromptu cooking class. My mother-in-law watched us from a distance, her expression unreadable as she silently tidied up. As we concluded the class and the dishes were served, they were met with enthusiastic praise. I must admit, Grace's cooking can be a bit too salty for my taste, but Natalie's dishes are delicate and refined, truly professional French cuisine. Jennifer, one of the participants, beamed with joy at the recognition. Feeling a mix of pride and unease, I offered a faint smile to my mother-in-law, but she remained focused on cleaning, undisturbed by the ongoing praises. Just as I pondered how to ease the tension, Daniel stepped in with a decisive statement. "I actually prefer Natalie's cooking. Mom's strong flavors have always made me concerned about salt and health. Going forward, Natalie should handle the cooking regularly." His words seemed to take my mother-in-law completely by surprise, and before long, she quietly withdrew to her room. The news of my culinary abilities spread quickly among my relatives, marking a significant shift in how they viewed me and my place in the family. This unexpected turn of events not only bolstered my confidence but also subtly shifted the household dynamics in ways I hadn't anticipated. As word of my culinary talent spread, I soon found myself receiving requests to teach cooking classes. Initially hesitant, I remembered the joy from the impromptu New Year's cooking session and decided to embrace the opportunity. People genuinely valued my skills, and through word of mouth, my reputation as a skilled chef of authentic French cuisine grew rapidly. Before I knew it, I was featured in media outlets and celebrated as a housewife renowned for her cooking. Requests for my classes began pouring in from all over the country. Life, I learned, is wonderfully unpredictable. This unexpected journey even led to a feature about me in a prominent cooking magazine. In the article, I spoke about my culinary heritage and my father's influence on my skills. As for my mother-in-law, who had once spread less than flattering rumors about my cooking abilities, she ceased commenting on culinary matters altogether after the shift in family and public opinion. Over time, she gradually stopped cooking entirely, leaving me with full responsibility for meals in our home. Despite the increased busyness, we now live together peacefully, a significant change from our earlier days.
After the somber funeral for my father, a prominent shareholder, my brother-in-law caught us off guard by raising the delicate topic of inheritance. The focus shifted to stocks and a substantial $5 million bequest, confidently asserting that my wife, the eldest daughter, and my sister was set to inherit this windfall. The revelation initially filled her with joy at the prospect of a significant inheritance. However, their excitement was short-lived when the family lawyer delivered the disheartening news that my brother-in-law had no legitimate claim to the inheritance. I, Greg Johnson, a 42-year-old office worker, reflected on my father's vibrant life. Despite his age of 78, he remained full of vitality, actively engaged in his work. My older sister, a perpetual source of trouble, led a carefree life, causing continuous worry for our parents. In her middle age, she introduced Aaron Corner, a man she intended to marry. Despite his youth and handsomeness, I couldn't warm up to him due to his demeanor. My sister demanded that our father finance her wedding, swiftly depleting the funds and unapologetically seeking more. A year after her marriage, tragedy struck. Our father collapsed while playing golf and passed away a few days later. Overwhelmed by grief, I found myself struggling with the funeral preparations, with no assistance from my sister. After the funeral, a lawyer visited our home to discuss the inheritance outlined in my father's will. While my mother and I were already aware of its contents, my sister and brother-in-law were oblivious until then. They shockingly claimed that the stocks and the $5 million inheritance should go to my wife. Stunned and speechless, my mother and I were taken aback. The lawyer corrected them, revealing that my brother-in-law had no right to inherit. Surprised and disappointed, my sister and her husband expressed disbelief and shock. The lawyer dropped another bombshell. My sister and I did not share the same father. This revelation left my sister furious, demanding an explanation from our mother, who wore an indescribable expression. The long-held family secret had finally come to light, leaving my sister shaken and seeking answers. "I'm sorry," our mother managed to say amidst the shaking emotions. "You are the child of my previous husband." Since childhood, my sister had teased me, claiming that Dad loved her more. Now faced with the truth, she seemed unable to accept it. However, she quickly shifted her stance, suggesting that if she was adopted, she would still have inheritance rights. Aaron chimed in, agreeing with her, yet our mother firmly denied any adoption, causing disbelief. "I'm the eldest daughter, and even Dad said so," my sister angrily declared, glaring at me in response. I felt my anger intensifying as I countered my sister's insatiable desire for more, despite the considerable amount of money our dad had already given her. My brother-in-law chimed in, supporting her claim and stating that it's natural to spend money on one's daughter. However, the lawyer intervened, drawing attention to the questionable spending, including debt repayment, and suggested reviewing the will. My sister panicked, claiming ignorance about any will. It turned out that our father had wanted to discuss and decide the contents with the family, but she had skipped it for frivolous reasons. When the lawyer proposed reviewing the will, my sister and her husband reluctantly agreed. The will clearly stated the transfer of property to my mother and me, explaining why my sister was not adopted. Her mistreatment of me and reckless spending had disappointed our father, realizing she had no right to the inheritance. My sister was visibly shocked, and her brother-in-law, who had initially supported her, suddenly changed his tune, accusing her of lying and abruptly leaving the room. In her anger, my sister blamed our mother for not asking to have her adopted, claiming it was unfair that only mom received the inheritance. Frustrated, she cried and screamed, expressing her disappointment. Despite my sister's outrageous behavior, the lawyer remained calm, explaining that as the biological son, I had the right to receive it all. Before things escalated further, he warned that the police might need to be involved if the situation continued. My sister appeared startled by the mention of the police, given her history of repeated theft. As my mother spoke tearfully to her, she clicked her tongue and left the room. Half a year passed, and the inheritance proceedings were completed without issue. Despite some grumbling from my sister and brother-in-law, they couldn't stand against the lawyer's efficiency. My mother gave my sister a small amount of money, but I had no intention of interfering. The frustrating part for our family was that the two had disappeared. Their blatant greed was so evident that even our relatives were lost for words. One day, my wife suggested that my mother, daughter, and I go out to eat. Since my father's passing, our mother had been down, but she showed smiles when with her granddaughter. I suggested to my mother, "Why don't you live with us?" But you know, Rook still comes home occasionally. Sis only comes around to beg for money, doesn't she? How long does she plan to keep this up? The reason my mom defends my sister is that she is her blood-related child, and there might be concern that if we visit our family home, my sister might cause trouble again. Understanding that, I told her to take her time thinking about it and then drove my mom to our family home. Upon arrival, we encountered something unexpected. The lights were on in our supposedly empty home. It wasn't the time for the helper to come, so we were puzzled. I parked the car, suggesting, "Let's go up and have some coffee with Mother." We got out of the car and headed to the entrance, but the moment we approached the door, a car came rushing in. "Mom, watch out." Hearing my daughter ahead of me, I shielded my wife with my body. The car just grazed me, and I managed to dodge it, but I collided with a nearby flower bed, injuring myself badly. The car stopped after hitting the garage door. "Are you okay, Dad?" My wife and daughter rushed over, supporting me. Mother was trembling in shock at the sudden event. Understandably, from that moment on, a day of turmoil began. I was taken to the hospital by ambulance and had to be hospitalized briefly. Later, I heard that Aaron Warner, my brother-in-law, was driving the car. According to the police, he explained that he mistook the accelerator for the brake. However, I had my doubts about that story. Amidst all of this, my sister and mother visited me in the hospital. Mother left briefly to arrange flowers, and during that time, my sister coldly looked at me and said, "You're only tough and bodied, huh?" With a slightly disappointed tone, I couldn't help but give her a smile. "If I had died in the accident, Mom would inherit everything, right? Messed up your plan," I said a bit sarcastically, and my sister looked uneasy. "You planned this, didn't you?" When I asked, my sister looked away, and I added, "But I won't be accepting Mom's share, so it won't work out for you." My sister looked surprised at this. She probably thought I would naturally accept it. I have a wife and kids, so I passed the inheritance to them. It's not strange for the head of the family to think that way. Even so, I've made a will early, like Dad did. My sister was taken aback at this. "What? So that means—" "Yeah, unfortunately, my share of the inheritance won't go to Mom." My sister stared at me, then began to shake with anger. "There's $5 million, right? You could at least share a bit." When I immediately refused, my sister furiously grabbed my collar. "I'm your sister. We should split it." Whether it was the amount of the inheritance that drove her mad, she continued to scream in a very aggressive voice. I felt pity for my sister. It's that greedy attitude that disappointed Dad. Don't you get it? My sister's face turned even redder, and she grabbed my neck. "Bro, stop it." Mother, who had just returned, scolded her loudly. Then the nurses, called by the nurses' call button, arrived and escorted my sister out of the room. Mother seemed to want to protect my sister, but my sister had lashed out at her too. As she left, she asked, "Why did she turn out like this?" Hearing Mother say this sadly, I felt a pain in my heart. Later, Mother's health deteriorated, and she fell off, gradually weakening. My wife and I started visiting the family home more frequently to support her, but this seemed to upset my sister. Probably she encountered my wife when coming to ask for money or heard about it from Mother. One day, my sister called my cell phone. "From now on, we will take care of Mom. You guys don't need to come. Watch this." All of a sudden, however, my sister wasn't listening and said, "We've already decided," before hanging up. My wife told me she had been turned away by my sister. Too concerned about how my sister, who had no experience in household chores or living, would manage, I quickly contacted Mother. To my surprise, I found out that my brother-in-law had experience in caregiving. Mother was still independent, not yet in a worrying state. This reassured me. However, within just a month, Mother was rushed to the hospital in an ambulance. It was said to be due to a medication dosage error. When we rushed to the hospital, Mother was shockingly weak. The doctors also seemed puzzled by her condition. I couldn't recall such a mistake ever happening before. Leaving my wife to care for Mother, I went to our family home, which was in a terrible state. Despite my mother's love for cooking, the usually well-stocked fridge was shockingly empty. Even the helper had been swiftly dismissed. Feeling ashamed of trusting my sister even a little, anger surged within me. Checking the safe where valuables were kept, I discovered a large amount of money missing from Mother's passbook. The passbook with the inheritance was secure in a bank locker, but there was hardly any money left for living expenses. Returning to my mother, I explained the situation and revealed my sister's betrayal. Brooke did such a thing. Mother seemed unaware of the passbook issue and showed a shocked expression. When asked about the medication error, she explained that my brother-in-law had prepared it and looked troubled. "Mom, I don't think you should let them into that house. They claimed they would take care of you, but the state of that house was the worst. And you've gotten so frail. Haven't they been feeding you properly?" Speaking with concern, I hung her head. "Mom, let's live together. I'll build a new house, and we can live there together." Moved by my suggestion, Mother shed tears. However, her condition continued to worsen. Despite the doctor's best efforts, they, along with my sister, seemed to weigh heavily on her. Ultimately, Mother passed away without recovering. When I went to the family home for the funeral, all the valuable items had disappeared. It seemed that my sister and brother-in-law, in need of money, had taken them. Standing in the desolate place, I was overcome with anger. I had to find a way to make my sister take responsibility for Mother's sake and as atonement for what she had done. I resolved to do something. The day after Mother's funeral, my sister and I met at the lawyer's office to discuss the inheritance. Condolences, but as her daughter, I'm entitled to Mother's inheritance. My sister said with a sense of superiority that made me laugh involuntarily. She seemed to be under some misconception. "Let's open the will then." As the lawyer revealed the contents of the will, my sister turned pale. "You're joking. Why, bro? You are not entitled to any of the inheritance. This is in accordance with Dad's wishes." My brother-in-law started to get angry, but the lawyer had nothing else to say except repeat the same thing. "This must be a mistake. Bro is her child, isn't she?" My brother-in-law suddenly became furious, throwing things off the table. "Are you trying to trick us? We won't let you get away with this. Give us the inheritance now." "Aaron, you planned to kill Mother, didn't you?" When I asked, my brother-in-law glared at me unpleasantly. "Oh, I wouldn't do such a thing." "Then why did the medication error occur?" My brother-in-law appeared annoyed. "I don't know anything about that. It's impossible that I can inherit. You must have done something." My sister was getting more agitated. "Now I'm even behind on my condo payments." I was shocked. She hadn't rushed to Mother's side after hearing of her death because she was busy with such matters, hoping for the inheritance. "Really, there's nothing left." My sister pressed the lawyer. "That seems to be the case. Let me explain in detail." The lawyer explained the details of the inheritance. Ultimately, after deducting what my sister had withdrawn and sold, there was hardly anything left for her to inherit. My sister held her head in dismay. I had discussed this in advance with the lawyer. I found satisfaction with the outcome. Stop joking. There can't be so little. My mother and I hadn't told my sister, but most of Mother's property had already been distributed to my children, her grandchildren. Therefore, there was already little left to inherit. However, my sister kept murmuring her dissatisfaction. I felt nothing but resentment towards my sister, who had lived off the money given by father and now mother, thinking she could rest easy knowing I would take care of her. But you just took her money. You are a true disgrace to our parents. I raised my voice in frustration. Caring for someone costs money, you know. Don't you understand? Then show me the receipts for what you spent on Mom's care. I'll cover any necessary expenses. As I extended my hand, my sister turned pale and was at a loss for words. I threw those away. That's not good. Without receipts, it can't be proven as evidence. Hearing the lawyer's words, my sister struggled to find a response. During this, my brother-in-law tried to calm me down. Greg, your sister is in a tough spot. Maybe you could help her out a bit as family. I cannot. My immediate response left my brother-in-law speechless. I've been hurt by my sister for a long time. Frankly, I feel like it's karma, but you're the only siblings, maybe just a little. He tried to say more, but I refused. I was filled with anger, and so was my brother-in-law, apparently. Dan, if that accident had worked out, Rook would have had the entire inheritance. What accident? Before I could ask, my brother-in-law started talking on his own. Because of this brother, things didn't go as planned. I was supposed to get a new car, but now there's barely enough money left even for repairs. My sister tried to stop him, but it was too late. That's a pretty serious statement. You could be accused of fraud. The lawyer held a recorder, smirking at my sister and brother-in-law. What the heck? Isn't that against the rules to do that? You agreed to our conversation being recorded at the beginning, didn't you? Called out by his own words, my brother-in-law's face turned pale. To him, I had one thing to say. Aaron, I will be pressing charges about that accident. Don't joke. Where's the evidence? The evidence has just been provided by you. My sister, crying, began to hit my brother-in-law. You idiot! It's all your fault. Why did you say that? Later, my brother-in-law faced legal consequences for his actions. Additionally, unresolved suspicions about his past emerged, requiring police involvement. For some time, my sister, as an accomplice, was said to face lesser charges. However, struggling with her condo payments, she was turned away by relatives when she asked for money. In contrast, I chose to work earnestly and not rely on inheritance. Now, receiving stock dividends has become a small pleasure in my life. In the aftermath of the legal proceedings, the rift between my sister and me widened. The family bonds that were already strained became nearly non-existent. Despite her attempts to seek support from relatives, my sister faced a cold shoulder and her financial struggles continued. Meanwhile, I focused on building a stable and fulfilling life for my own family, working diligently. I found solace in providing for my wife and children without relying on the tumultuous inheritance battles that had plagued us. The stock dividends became not just a financial benefit, but a symbol of my commitment to a more secure and principled life. Over time, my sister's situation didn't improve. The consequences of her actions weighed heavily on her, both financially and emotionally. It became a stark reminder of the importance of responsible choices and the lasting impact they can have on one's life. As the years passed, I held no ill will towards my sister, recognizing that everyone faces their own battles and makes their own choices. Still, the events that unfolded served as a powerful lesson about the significance of integrity, responsibility, and the enduring consequences of one's actions. In the midst of the turmoil, I found strength in forging ahead with resilience, determined to create a future that wasn't tainted by past misfortunes. The dividends, once a mere financial gain, evolved into a testament to the enduring power of personal growth and the ability to rise above adversity. Life moved forward, and I embraced the opportunities to thrive, leaving behind the shadows of familial discord. The lessons learned from this chapter of my life became an integral part of shaping my values and decisions, ensuring a legacy built on principles rather than the pursuit of material gain. In the end, it was not the inheritance that defined my journey, but the choices made along the way. Choices that led to a life grounded in authenticity, resilience, and a commitment to building a better future for those I cared about the most.
Hi, I'm Michael Foster, and this is the story of how I learned that sometimes the biggest betrayals lead to the sweetest victories. You see, in business, just like in family, the person you trust the most can be the one plotting your downfall. But they often forget to check what's really beneath their feet before they push you off the cliff. Let me take you back to where it all began. Foster Technologies wasn't always the $100 million company it is today. 15 years ago, it was just a struggling consulting firm my father had built from scratch. Dad was brilliant with technology but terrible with business. By 2010, we were 3 months away from bankruptcy, and my father's health was failing under the stress. I was 25, fresh out of business school, while my older brother James was 30 and already a familiar face in the local nightlife scene. Dad had always favored James, the charming firstborn who could talk his way out of anything. But charm doesn't pay the bills, and James's party lifestyle had already cost the company several major clients. I still remember that rainy Tuesday when I found Dad slumped over his desk, tears in his eyes, looking at our latest financial reports. "It's over, Michael," he whispered, his voice broken. "Everything I built. I'm going to lose it all." Something in me snapped that day. I couldn't watch my father's dream die, even if he'd always seen me as second best. While James was out spending company money at exclusive clubs, I started working 18-hour days. I learned every aspect of the business, met with every client, reviewed every contract. Mom worried about me. "Michael, you need to rest," she'd say, bringing dinner to my office at midnight. "You can't save the company by yourself." But that's exactly what I did. The first year was brutal. I restructured our debt, cut unnecessary expenses, including James' entertainment budget, and personally visited every major client we'd lost. Many slammed their doors in my face, but I kept coming back. Persistence pays off. By the end of that year, we were breaking even. James found it hilarious. "Look at little Mikey playing businessman," he'd mock whenever he'd bothered to show up at the office. "Dad's still going to put me in charge, I'm the oldest." I ignored him and focused on work. Over the next 5 years, I transformed Foster Technologies from a simple consulting firm into a full-service digital transformation company. We developed proprietary software solutions, expanded into cloud services, and built a reputation for excellence in the industry. The company grew exponentially. From $2 million in revenue, we hit $10 million, then $50 million, and finally crossed the $100 million mark last year. Our staff grew from 20 to over 500. We opened offices in 3 countries. Dad's health improved as the company flourished, but his favoritism didn't change. Every success was somehow attributed to James' leadership, even though he spent most of his time planning his next vacation. In family dinners, Dad would praise James' business acumen while I sat quietly going through quarterly reports on my phone. I didn't care about the credit. I cared about the company, our employees, and the legacy we were building. Besides, I had my own plans. What nobody knew, not even my father, was that I'd been carefully documenting everything over the years. Every decision James sabotaged, every client he lost, every dollar he wasted. More importantly, I've been quietly building relationships with our key clients, making myself indispensable to their operations. I also had another secret, one that would turn out to be crucial. During the company's darkest days, when we were nearly bankrupt, I used my own savings and taken out personal loans to keep us afloat. In exchange, I'd received shares. Lots of shares. The paperwork was buried in mountains of corporate documentation. But I legally owned 40% of Foster Technologies. Or at least I thought that would be enough to protect me. I couldn't have been more wrong. Last month, everything changed. Dad announced his retirement, and everyone expected him to name me as his successor. After all, I'd been effectively running the company for years. Even James had been showing up to work more often, probably sensing the change coming. The shareholders' meeting was set for Friday afternoon. All major stakeholders were present, including our board members and key investors. I prepared a comprehensive presentation about our growth strategy for the next 5 years. Dad stood up to make his announcement. I noticed James smirking in his seat, but I didn't think much of it at the time. Ladies and gentlemen, Dad began, as you know, I'm retiring as CEO of Foster Technologies. This company has been my life's work, and choosing my successor was not an easy decision. He paused, looking around the room. But there's only one person who truly embodies the leadership qualities needed to take Foster Technologies to the next level. Someone who understands our family values and has the vision to lead us into the future. I sat straighter in my chair, ready to accept the responsibility I'd been preparing for all these years. My son, James Foster, will be taking over as CEO effective immediately. The room went silent. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. But Dad wasn't finished. Furthermore, James has brought to my attention some concerning irregularities in our recent operations. It seems that certain individuals have been making unauthorized decisions and potentially compromising our company's integrity. James stood up, holding a folder. I'm afraid my brother Michael has been operating outside his authority, making promises to clients we can't keep, and potentially engaging in unethical practices. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Every accusation was a twisted version of the truth. The very decisions that had saved and grown the company were being presented as reckless and unauthorized. Therefore, Dad continued, as my final act as CEO, I'm terminating Michael's employment with Foster Technologies, effective immediately. The security guards were already approaching my chair. James's voice dripped with fake sympathy. I'm sorry it had to end this way, little brother. But hey, maybe now you can get a life outside the office. The room erupted in whispers as I was escorted out, my key card deactivated, my access revoked. I could see the pity in some faces, the schadenfreude in others. But they had no idea what was coming. Because while James was plotting my downfall, he'd forgotten 3 crucial things. First, those unauthorized decisions were all properly documented and approved. Second, my 40% ownership stake wasn't as buried as they thought. And third, well, let's just say that when you spend 10 years building a company's technology infrastructure, you learn where all the bodies are buried, sometimes literally. As I walked to my car that evening, I pulled out my phone and sent a single text message to an old friend at the SEC. Then I went home and waited. Monday morning was going to be very, very interesting. Monday morning arrived with a thunderstorm, fitting weather for what was about to unfold. I sat in my home office, watching the clock tick towards 9 a.m. when James would be strutting into his new CEO office for the first time. The weekend had been interesting. Mom had called 17 times, leaving tearful voicemails about family unity. Dad hadn't called at all. James had been too busy celebrating at his favorite clubs. The photos were all over social media, including some questionable ones with the company credit card clearly visible on the table. I smiled, remembering how James always thought technology was beneath him. That's geek stuff, he'd say, refusing to learn even basic cybersecurity protocols. Well, that arrogance was about to cost him dearly. At exactly 9:15 a.m., my phone buzzed. A text from Sarah, my loyal executive assistant who James hadn't bothered to fire. Probably because he thought she just brought coffee. It's starting, her message read. I opened my laptop and connected to Foster Technologies' internal security feed. Yes, I still had access. When you build a system from the ground up, you always leave yourself a back door. The camera in the CEO's office showed James walking in, coffee in hand, ready to begin his reign. He sat in a leather chair, my chair, and pressed the power button on his computer. That's when the show began. Instead of the Windows login screen, a video started playing. It was security footage from 3 years ago, showing James in this very office, making a deal with our biggest competitor to sell them our client data. The audio was crystal clear. Of course I can get you their information, James's voice rang out. My idiot brother does all the work anyway. Just make sure the payment goes to my Cayman account. James frantically tried to turn off the monitor, but nothing worked. The video kept playing on every screen in his office. But that was just the beginning. His phone buzzed. The SEC had received an anonymous tip about insider trading, complete with documented evidence of James' illegal activities over the past decade. His private email started pinging with notifications. Somehow, all his confidential communications have been leaked to the board members. Down in the lobby, federal agents were walking through the front door. I watched through the security feed as James's face turned from confusion to panic. He tried calling Dad, but Dad's phone was busy, probably because he was getting his own set of revelations about his beloved firstborn's activities. At 9:30 a.m., Sarah walked into James' office. "Mr. Foster," she said calmly, "the board members are requesting an emergency meeting. Also, there are some federal agents here to see you." James started sweating. "Tell them I'm busy. Cancel everything, and get it up here to fix these damn computers." Sarah smiled politely. "I'm afraid that won't be possible. You see, the entire department just resigned. They sent a company-wide email explaining why. Something about loyalty to the person who actually built this company." "What? They can't do that. We have contracts." Actually, Sarah placed a folder on his desk. "They can. Their contracts were with a subsidiary company that holds all our intellectual property rights. A company that, as of this morning, is no longer affiliated with Foster Technologies." James's hands shook as he opened the folder. Inside was a simple document showing the ownership structure of Foster Innovation Labs, the subsidiary I'd quietly created years ago. The company that actually owned all our patents, software, and client contracts. And I owned 100% of it. But the clients," James stammered, "have already been informed of the change in management. Most have already signed new contracts, directly with Foster Innovation Labs. It seems they prefer working with the person who actually handled their accounts all these years." The color drained from James's face as he finally understood. Every piece of technology that made Foster Technologies valuable, every client relationship that kept it profitable, every key employee who made it run, they were all loyal to me. He'd stolen an empty shell. The office door opened again. 2 FBI agents walked in, followed by Mr. Patterson, our chief legal counsel. "James Foster," one agent said, "we need to ask you some questions about certain financial transactions." "You can't do this," James shouted, looking wildly around the room. "I'm the CEO. I'm in charge here." Mr. Patterson cleared his throat. "Actually, about that," he pulled out another document. "The board just concluded an emergency meeting. Given the circumstances, they voted to remove you as CEO, effective immediately." "They can't do that. You own shares in Foster Technologies," Mr. Patterson corrected. "A company that, as of 9 o'clock this morning, has no intellectual property, no major clients, and no core development team. I believe the stock price reflects that reality." James lunged for his computer, probably to check the stock ticker. But of course, his screen was still playing videos of his various illegal activities over the years. As James was escorted out of the building by federal agents, his designer suit wrinkled and his face ashen, I sent one final company-wide email from my remote access. "To all remaining Foster Technologies employees, you have a choice. Stay with a sinking ship or join us at Foster Innovation Labs, where innovation and integrity actually mean something. Your jobs are secure, your benefits will be better, and most importantly, your hard work will be respected." Within an hour, 90% of the staff had accepted the offer. But my revenge wasn't complete yet. There was still the matter of dear old Dad's retirement fund. The fallout was spectacular. Within 24 hours, Foster Technologies stock had plummeted 70%. News of James' arrest made headlines in every major business publication. Tech CEO arrested on multiple fraud charges. Foster Technologies in freefall as scandal erupts. But I wasn't done yet. 3 days after James's arrest, I sat in my new office at Foster Innovation Labs headquarters, a modern building I'd secretly purchased 6 months ago. Sarah walked in with a familiar face. Dad's financial advisor, Mr. Goldman. "He's been calling nonstop," Mr. Goldman said, looking uncomfortable. "Ever since he realized that his retirement fund is worthless, I finished for him, because he invested everything in Foster Technologies stock. Dad had always bragged about having skin in the game, keeping his entire retirement portfolio in company shares. It was poor financial planning, but he'd never listened to advice about diversification. Now those shares were worth pennies on the dollar. Your father is desperate, Mr. Goldman continued. Mrs. Foster, your mother, she's worried they might lose the house. I leaned back in my chair, thinking about all the times Dad had dismissed my warnings about James's behavior. All the times he'd attributed my success to luck rather than hard work. Set up a meeting, I finally said. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., here. The next morning, my parents arrived at Foster Innovation Labs. Mom looked like she'd been crying. Dad looked like he aged 10 years in a week. They sat across from me in the visitor chairs, the same model as the ones Dad used to make me sit in while he lectured me about real leadership. Son, Dad began, his voice shaking. I know I made mistakes. Mistakes? I interrupted quietly. You let James destroy evidence of his crimes. You helped him embezzle company funds. You were complicit in fraud that hurt our employees, our clients, and our shareholders. I didn't know. He tried to protest. You knew. I cut him off. You just didn't care. Because James was your golden boy, and I was just the backup plan. Mom started crying softly. I handed her a tissue. But that's not why you're here, I continued. You're here because you're broke. Because the company shares that were supposed to fund your retirement are worthless. Dad slumped in his chair. Michael, please, we're family. Family? I smiled without humor. Was I family when you let James take credit for my work? Was I family when you fired me in front of the entire company? I pulled out a folder. I learned that dramatic revelations were more effective with proper documentation. Here's what's going to happen. Foster Innovation Labs will buy back your shares in Foster Technologies at their original purchase price. Their eyes widened with hope. But, I continued, there are conditions. First, you both sign a non-disclosure agreement about James' activities. Second, you retire, quietly, to that house in Florida you always talked about. Third, you stay out of my business, completely. You do that for us, Mom whispered. Not for you, I corrected, for the scared 12-year-old boy who used to believe his father hung the moon. He deserved better than what you gave him. Dad started to speak, but I held up my hand. One more thing. The money comes with a trustee, someone who'll make sure you don't gamble it away on another one of James's schemes. Monthly allowance, investment restrictions, the whole package. You don't trust us, Dad said sadly. You taught me that lesson very well. They signed the papers. As security escorted them out, Dad turned back one last time. I was wrong about you, son. You're a better businessman than I ever was. No, Dad, I replied. I'm just better at remembering who my real enemies are. 5 years have passed since then. Foster Innovation Labs is now a billion-dollar company known for its cutting-edge technology and ethical business practices. James served 2 years in prison and now works as a bartender in Vegas. Dad and Mom live quietly in Florida, sending occasional postcards that I never answer. Last week, I received an invitation to speak at my old business school. The topic? The importance of integrity in family business. I accepted with a smile. After all, I have quite a story to tell. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying your enemies. It's building something so successful that they have to live with the knowledge that they bet on the wrong horse. And as for those who wonder how the quiet one, the careful one, the backup plan pulled off such a complete victory, well, let's just say that while the peacocks are busy showing off their feathers, the eagles are watching, waiting, and planning their next move. Because in business, just like in life, it's not about who starts at the top. It's about who's still standing when the dust settles. An ambulance? No, we can't call one, my husband shouted, panic evident in his voice. After years apart, we have finally reunited with Naomi, and in her arms was a small child. As I looked closer, it became clear that Naomi was noticeably pregnant. The unexpected situation left my mind blank for a moment, but I quickly realized they needed help. That's when Naomi made a special request. My name is Mary, and I'm 60 years old. I now assist my husband, Isaac, who works as a potter. After graduating from college, I worked as a general office clerk. However, I met Isaac through a pottery event. The event displayed and sold pottery, and there was also an area where you could try your hand at pottery making. Though I had little interest in pottery at the time, a poster at the city hall caught my eye, so I decided to visit. As I wandered around, I found the pottery experience area and learned pottery from Isaac. The experience sparked a deep fascination with pottery in me, and I began visiting his home and workshop to see more of his work. Isaac remembered me, and each time we met, we had engaging conversations. Eventually, our relationship transformed from craftsman and customer to lovers, and after 3 years of dating, we married. Isaac always encouraged me to pursue what I loved, but I was so captivated by pottery that I decided to support his work. By the time we married, his parents had already retired from pottery, which made me even more determined to stand by his side. Amidst all this, we were blessed with a daughter, whom we named Naomi. We showered her with love and affection. When Naomi was 3, Isaac and I wanted her to appreciate the charm of pottery, so we took her to the workshop and let her touch and shape the clay. Naomi showed a natural talent, creating beautiful pieces and taking great joy in her work. As she grew, she expressed a desire to continue the family business, brightening our future even more. Isaac had several apprentices who were all kind and welcoming to the idea of Naomi working there in the future. After graduating high school, Naomi went on to university, where she studied not only pottery but also Japanese history and cultural arts. On holidays and days off from class, she helped with the family business, honing her skills. Thanks to Isaac's guidance from a young age, her talents developed impressively, astonishing everyone around her. However, Naomi never became arrogant. Instead, she continued her efforts to spread the charm of pottery throughout Japan, working closely with her disciples. 5 years passed since Naomi graduated from university, and as she approached 30, we often marveled at how quickly she had grown. Then one day, Naomi shared some surprising news. "Mom, I'm getting married." "Married?" I exclaimed in shock at her sudden announcement. Naomi had a boyfriend since her university days, and while I had anticipated that they might eventually marry, hearing the news still left me speechless. His name was Sean. I had spoken with him several times and felt he was a very good person. Later, Naomi explained the circumstances leading up to their marriage. It seems he had first proposed right after she graduated, but at the time she wanted to focus on continuing the family's pottery business and asked him to wait a little longer. Sean respected her wishes and continued to propose over the years. Time passed, and one day when Naomi felt ready to make a decision, she opened her social media and saw photos of her classmates with their children. Seeing their happiness, she realized it might be time for her to marry too. Everyone's married with children, and I'm still not, she thought to herself. After reflecting on it, she decided, I want to marry Sean. If that's your choice, we have nothing against it, I told her. Thank you, she replied. Naomi had set a few conditions before accepting Sean's proposal. She wanted to continue working as before and wasn't considering having children for a while. While her classmates with children seemed happy, she wished to maintain her current lifestyle even after marrying. Sean agreed, and they decided to move forward with the marriage. However, I knew that inevitable changes in lifestyle might arise, and Naomi could find some of these unknown changes confusing. I heard that their new home would be near ours, and I wanted to offer as much support as possible. Feel free to ask us about anything, I told her. Yes, thank you so much, Naomi replied. The reality of my daughter getting married was still sinking in, and I felt a mix of excitement and nerves when Naomi talked about it. But after hearing her thoughts, I was relieved to know she had made a well-considered decision. I had been hoping Naomi would build a happy family, but this marriage would soon reveal Sean's true character, drastically altering her once joyful life. After leaving home, Naomi started a new life with Sean, and even after their marriage, she frequently returned to her parents' home, allowing us to maintain the close relationship we always had. However, about 6 months into the marriage, we were suddenly informed that they would be moving far away due to a transfer from Sean's company. Sean had known about the potential transfer before marrying Naomi, but had kept it a secret, likely fearing she would leave him if she knew. This revelation made me doubt Sean and wonder if he genuinely considered Naomi's feelings. I asked her, "Are you sure this is okay? Isn't it possible for him to go alone?" Naomi replied that she had suggested staying behind to continue her job, but Sean insisted that he needed her with him. She decided to comply with his request, remembering how he had cared for her in the past. I chose to remain silent, and soon after, Naomi and Sean moved away, leaving me deeply saddened. The students and I, who had spent so much time together with her, felt her absence acutely, which only reaffirmed her importance to us. Half a year later, on what seemed like an ordinary day, I received an astonishing call from Naomi. She had given birth to a child. This was my first grandchild, and while I was overjoyed, questions began to arise. Considering the timing of their move, she must have been pregnant when they left. She had previously mentioned not wanting children for a while, so what changed her mind? And why decide to have a child knowing they were moving? These thoughts began to spread through my mind. When I asked about Naomi's well-being, she assured me everything was fine. If she said it was all right, I felt it wasn't my place to worry further. I ended the call by reminding her that she could always return home if needed. After discussing the situation with Isaac, we concluded that since Sean seemed to be harboring doubts, but Naomi insisted everything was fine, it was better not to pry too deeply. We decided to stay in touch, ready to act immediately if anything happened. However, since the birth of our grandchild, we had received no news and our worry began to grow. When I couldn't bear it any longer, I tried to contact her, but it was Sean, not Naomi, who answered the phone. "Sean, where's Naomi?" "She's in the bath right now." "I see, I understand," I replied, though I felt uneasy. After Naomi became a full-time housewife and started her new life, I tried calling her cell phone during the day but got no response. When I called again at night, it was Sean who answered, saying Naomi was in the bath, and I couldn't speak to her. I couldn't understand why Sean was always the one answering when I was clearly calling Naomi's number. "Why is it always you answering? I call during the day, and nobody picks up." "She's in the bath, I told you," he replied, "even in the daytime, I don't know." I was shocked and lost for words at Sean's defiant response. Sensing my silence, he quickly ended the call. Since then, each time I tried to reach her, Sean would come up with reasons like, "The baby is crying, so please stop calling," or, "Isn't this getting a bit excessive?" My suspicion toward Sean only grew, but I was completely taken aback when I finally heard the reason behind his attitude. "The truth is, Naomi doesn't want to have anything to do with you anymore. Could you please stop calling?" he said. "What? Why would she say that? Are you sure this is really what Naomi wants? Your parenting was too strict. She's actually been wanting to leave for a while. She had her apprentices and couldn't easily break away, but now she's out and truly happy. That can't be. Do you think we're deceiving you? Don't you find it strange that your calls don't connect during the day? Naomi is avoiding contact with you. It's about time you understand that." I was utterly shocked. I was at a loss for words, stunned into silence as Sean continued, "Can't you tell by my attitude? Let me be clear, we're bothered by you. I wondered when you'd realize it, but you're incredibly oblivious. If you had noticed from the start, you'd have seen that Naomi never suffered as much as you think. You're too slow to notice anything. That's your answer, so please don't contact us again," he said, and then hung up the phone. "Wait, just a moment," I called out, but my words didn't reach him. After the call ended, I was left with nothing but a sense of emptiness. I tried calling again the next day at noon, but it seemed Sean had blocked my calls, likely to shield Naomi. Reflecting on Sean's past behavior and statements, I began to understand. Was Naomi truly afraid of us? The thought alone made sadness well up within me. When my husband Isaac returned home, I explained the situation about Sean and Naomi. He looked just as sad and lost for words as I was. "So we should probably not get involved anymore, right?" he asked. "Yes," I replied, the reality sinking in. I never imagined Naomi was going through such hard times. We fully believed Sean's story and decided not to contact Naomi anymore. 4 years passed and our family business thrived. Our works found buyers one after another. Our income and fame grew. And not just us, but our apprentices also celebrated the success. As time passed, some apprentices left to become independent, others joined, and we even found a successor to continue the family business, bringing us some peace of mind. However, we never forgot about Naomi. We were constantly worried about her well-being and safety, but we restrained ourselves, not wanting to scare her further, and avoided contact. Then, on an unbelievable day, an intense typhoon struck. As the wind and rain intensified, we took a break from work and stayed home. It had been a while since we could spend time together as a couple during a storm. Late into the night, while we were asleep, the doorbell suddenly rang, waking us up. It must have been around 1 a.m. Who could it be at this time of night? Isaac wondered, turning on the light and looking at me. I don't know, I replied, feeling a mix of anxiety and curiosity. We hesitantly moved toward the entrance. Isaac, gathering his courage, opened the door, and there stood an unexpected figure. Dad, Mom. Naomi's voice trembled as she spoke. To our disbelief, it was Naomi standing there with a child in her arms, a girl who had lost consciousness, undoubtedly our granddaughter. She's still alive, but she's in critical condition, Naomi said, her voice strained. As we took a closer look at Naomi, we noticed she was visibly pregnant. Are you pregnant again? I asked, my heart racing. 9 months, she replied, her voice barely a whisper while I struggled to keep my panic in check. I quickly realized that both the baby and Naomi were in immediate danger. Before diving into the details, I knew the most important thing was to get them to the hospital as soon as possible. Naomi, desperate and scared, pleaded, please call an ambulance. However, Isaac, caught off guard by the intensity of the situation, refused her request. What are you talking about? There's no way I can call one in this storm, he exclaimed, his frustration slipping out. But then, seeing the fear in Naomi's eyes, he softened. It's okay, I'll take you to the emergency room tonight. Unfortunately, Isaac had already been drinking and couldn't drive, so I stepped in. I quickly prepared the car and drove Naomi and her child to the hospital myself. Thankfully, we arrived swiftly, and she was able to receive the urgent medical attention she needed. The diagnosis was severe malnutrition for both Naomi and her child. They were immediately hospitalized and began receiving treatment. Thankfully, there was no major impact on the baby, and we felt a momentary relief, knowing they were in good hands. We decided to wait until Naomi had recovered before asking her for the full story. As we arrived at the hospital, Naomi lost consciousness during the examination. While waiting for Isaac to bring clothes for Naomi and her child, I stayed by her side, watching over her as she lay unconscious. The nurses assured me they would take care of her grandchild, which lightened my heart a bit. Looking at Naomi, I noticed the deep fatigue etched into her face. The dark shadows under her eyes told the story of sleepless nights and relentless stress. I had no idea what had happened to her after they moved, but it was clear that she had been through an overwhelming amount of hardship. I quietly watched over Naomi as she slept. Just after 11 a.m., she finally opened her eyes. Mom, she murmured. Naomi, I responded softly, relieved to see her awake. She looked slightly better than yesterday, perhaps due to the rest, but I still couldn't shake the worry. I called the nurse to inform them that Naomi had woken up, and after the doctor examined her, she returned to her room. I approached her quietly, unsure of how to begin. Naomi, are you okay? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. She offered a calm smile and replied, Yes, I'm fine. Thank you, Mom. I'm relieved to hear that, but you really gave us a scare. I'm sorry, Mom. I must have troubled Dad too. He must have been shocked. We were shocked, but that doesn't matter. We're just worried about you. Naomi didn't seem afraid of us. Instead, she looked relieved. As she lay in bed, we continued our conversation. To us, she was still our beloved daughter, even though she had become Sean's wife. As parents, we couldn't stop worrying about why she had arrived in such an exhausted state and why she had come in the middle of the night. But we hesitated to pry too deeply, so I decided to wait until Naomi was ready to talk on her own. It was okay if she didn't say anything. Her feelings were our priority. As days passed, Naomi visibly regained her energy and began to smile more often. The tension of our reunion after so many years transformed into a sense of relief as she started to open up to us. One day, while visiting Naomi's hospital room with Isaac, we noticed she had a serious, contemplative look on her face. Curious about what was on her mind, we decided to act as usual, though her smile suggested something was different. Eventually, Naomi spoke up, her voice earnest. Can I talk about what happened after I moved? We were surprised by her sudden words, but it seemed Naomi had resolved to share her story. Of course, if you want to talk, we're here to listen, I assured her. Thanks. Then I'll begin. As Naomi started her story, we were astounded by what she revealed. Apparently, Sean was not the person she had thought he was. She had accepted his proposal, believing it would lead to happiness. After years of being in a relationship, she thought she knew him well. But after marrying him, she discovered his true nature. Sean was incredibly possessive, demanding her full attention at all times. He isolated her from her friends, prohibited her from doing anything outside of household chores, and forbade her from leaving the house. He even confiscated her smartphone, cutting off all her means of communication with the outside world. The last time Naomi had informed me about the birth of our grandchild was just before he seized her phone. "Why didn't you seek help earlier?" I asked, shocked. Naomi explained that she thought it would be futile. Sean had convinced her that we despised her and that he was the only one she could rely on. Admitting this left Naomi visibly shaken, and I felt a surge of sadness and anger on her behalf. Naomi had developed a deep fear of us, exacerbated by the severe restrictions imposed on her life. She wasn't allowed proper sleep and was given only a single piece of bread for her daily meal. Even the times she could use the bathroom were strictly controlled, and she wasn't permitted to leave her room outside those times. The extremity of her situation became evident from her harrowing account. Overwhelmed with guilt for raising her child in such dire conditions, Naomi resolved to flee. After seeing her child sleep lifelessly, she was driven by the desperate need to provide a better life. Despite believing her family might dislike her, she decided to return to her hometown for help. Acting swiftly, she sneaked out of the house and caught the last train to reach us. Hearing her confession made everything fall into place. To ensure she wasn't just afraid of us, we asked, and she shook her head in response. "He was lying to you too," she said. I replied, "It's easy to believe what you're told. I'm sorry I didn't notice anything sooner." We then contacted the police and filed a report. A female officer came to the hospital to gather details, and the police immediately raided Sean's house. However, he had already fled, likely in search of Naomi. The police increased patrols around the hospital and our home, anticipating his return. Weeks later, Naomi gave birth while still hospitalized and was discharged with her child. We breathed a sigh of relief at the arrival of the new life. With the family business left in the capable hands of apprentices and Isaac back at home, we felt more secure. Although the situation remained precarious, seeing Naomi smile like she used to filled us with happiness. We deeply hope for these peaceful days to continue, but reality often defies our expectations. One seemingly peaceful afternoon, while preparing lunch, a sudden noise came from the second floor where no one was supposed to be. Isaac, who had been relaxed, noticed the sound and said, "I'll go check upstairs." We would have ignored such a noise before, but ever since Naomi's incident, we had been living on high alert. I told Naomi and her children to stay close and watch for any signs of trouble, clutching my smartphone. Then a shout echoed from the second floor, "What are you doing?" It was clear there was a scuffle with an intruder.
Hello, my name is Mary. Right now, I'm working with my husband Samuel at his family's business called The Enterprise. It's a small, cozy company run by Samuel's dad, Liam. There are about 6 of us working there. Liam isn't very involved in day-to-day activities. Samuel takes the lead and might become the next boss. He works closely with clients and pushes new projects to help the company grow. When we have big projects, everyone pitches in, making the atmosphere energetic and passionate. I've been part of this lively place for 8 years now since I married into the family. But Samuel's mom, Amanda, seems unsure about my role here. Recently, when I got home early to cook dinner and Samuel stayed late at the office, Amanda confronted me with some tough words. She asked me, "How long do you plan to stick around in our family's business?" Her tone sounded critical and disapproving. Since Amanda retired, she started criticizing my decisions instead of enjoying her free time. I tried to stay calm and asked her, "What do you mean by clinging?" She replied sharply, suggesting I married Samuel out of necessity, and now took advantage of working at their company. This wasn't the first time she accused me like this, it was happening more often. When I got married, I chose to leave my old job and join Samuel's family business. It was my decision not because I had no other options, as Amanda seemed to think. Trying to explain, I told her, "Mom, I could work somewhere else if I wanted. I chose to be here." But she brushed it off, convinced she understood my motives. The tension with my mother-in-law went beyond words. Despite promising to take over household duties after retiring, she rarely helped, leaving Liam to often ask for her assistance with chores. Instead, she insisted, "I've worked my whole life. Now it's the daughter-in-law's turn to handle things at home." So I often ended up managing dinner and cleaning up afterward. One afternoon, I gathered my courage to address a household issue that was bothering me. "Amanda," I started cautiously, "I've noticed dishes often pile up in the sink. It would be helpful if you could clean up after your meals." Instead of understanding, she reacted strongly. She accused me of crossing boundaries and questioned my right as her daughter-in-law to set rules in her home. Feeling drained by our argument, I knew time was slipping away. If I didn't start dinner soon, we'd eat very late. Despite my frustration, I stayed calm. "Mom, let's talk more later," I suggested, hoping to ease the tension for now and focus on cooking. Amanda seemed to calm down and left for the living room, leaving me alone with the noise of kitchen utensils. Liam and Samuel had seen Amanda treat me this way before. They tried to step in when they could, but it didn't seem to change much. When they addressed the issue, they looked concerned and frustrated, wanting our family to get along better. Ironically, whenever Liam and Samuel confronted Amanda about her behavior, it often made her angrier at me, making her hostility worse. Her usual calm and gentle manner would turn into contempt, and her words hurt deeply, even though she never physically harmed me. Liam and Samuel's support became my sanctuary, helping me endure Amanda's hurtful comments. One tough morning, after I cleaned up from breakfast and was getting ready for work, Amanda suddenly exclaimed, "Oh dear, what a mess. It looks like a garbage dump here." Out of nowhere, she poured a bucket of water on my handbag. I stood there in shock, feeling a mix of disbelief and anger. "Why would you do that, Amanda?" I managed to ask, my voice shaking. Amanda's reply was dismissive, almost playful, like a mischievous child. "Oh, was that your stuff? I thought it was just a big piece of trash." Her casual attitude made me even more furious. "Even if you thought it was trash, who pours water on something?" I argued, struggling to grasp her lack of consideration. In the morning light, sitting across from Amanda in our living room, her expression was cold and determined, as if she had decided on a drastic action. "What on earth are you thinking? Now the carpet's soaked, and what about my things?" I blurted out, feeling a mix of confusion and frustration as I hurriedly took out the wet items from my bag. Important work documents lay spread out on the table, drying off. Amanda looked at me with a chilling calmness, showing no remorse or concern for the chaos she had caused. "You don't need to go to work anymore," she said flatly. I was completely stunned by her statement. "Excuse me?" I replied, filled with disbelief and shock. Amanda's next words hit me hard. "You've been hanging around this house for 8 years, but today I can finally get rid of you." Her voice dripped with venom and determination, a side of her I'd never seen before. My mind raced with sadness. "Get rid of me," I repeated, my voice betraying my disbelief. "She made me feel like an outsider in my own family. My daughter is joining the company, so we need you to leave. Today's your last day. All you have to do is apologize to your father-in-law and Samuel for causing trouble." She laughed mockingly, adding insult to injury. She was using my job to push me out. I had invested years into that job, earning respect and making cherished memories. Shocked and heartbroken, I struggled to understand the harshness of her decision. I had devoted myself to this family, yet it seemed my efforts meant nothing to her. "Are you sure about this? Wasn't Emma working at a clothing store in Philadelphia?" I asked, my voice showing my confusion and concern. My job meant more to me than just a paycheck. It was my path to personal fulfillment. Meanwhile, Emma, my sister-in-law, tired of city life and its impersonal nature, decided to come back. She said she was fed up with the cold people in Philadelphia, so I told her I had a job waiting for her once she returned home. Amanda explained firmly, leaving little room for discussion. Amanda's words hit me hard. "She's agreed to come back immediately, and now that she has, I want you out of this house." Her statement was shocking, almost impossible to accept. With one decision, she was ready to completely upend my life, disregarding my place in the family without any chance for dialogue. Coldly, she handed me an envelope. "I've written your resignation letter," she announced, effectively casting me out of our home. In that moment, my heart broke. Years of dedication and closeness were brushed aside like they meant nothing. Her actions ripped apart the bonds that held our family together, leaving them irreparably damaged. With a heavy heart, I walked the short 5 minutes to the company, a route I knew well, but today it felt heavy with emotions. Each step under the cool morning sky carried the weight of the situation unfolding. When I entered the office, I shared with Liam, my father-in-law, and Samuel, my husband. I told them about Amanda's harsh ultimatum. They looked shocked and held back their anger, staying composed despite the turmoil. They cautiously suggested it might be best for me to step back for a while to show Amanda the impact of her demands. This suggestion threw my heart into even more confusion. After years of working hard at our family business, the idea of taking a break longer than the usual holidays like Thanksgiving or Christmas seemed strange and overwhelming. Encouraged by Samuel and Liam's supportive words, "Why not take a step forward and try something new?" I decided to take a short trip. As I packed, my mind raced with thoughts about my life, the decisions I had made, and what lay ahead in the future. Meanwhile, my sister-in-law Emma, who was supposed to take over my role at the company, arrived shockingly late at 2 p.m. Her casual attitude left Samuel and Liam bewildered and frustrated. Despite their attempts to help her understand the business, Emma showed little interest in learning its intricacies. Upon hearing this news, anxiety gripped me about the future of the company. Even as I looked forward to my journey and hoped to avoid another encounter with Amanda, I quickly set off. Watching the landscape change from the train window, I took the opportunity to reflect on my past and present. The journey provided not just physical distance but a chance to breathe and think about what lay ahead for me. As I enjoyed local seafood specialties during my travels, my thoughts frequently turned to my family and our business. I was deep in these reflections on the 5th day of my retreat when my peace was suddenly shattered by a tearful call from Emma. "What's happening?" Mom said it was an easy job, just sitting in a chair, but Samuel and Dad act like I can't do anything right. Emma lamented, clearly frustrated. Her words sounded like they echoed the assurances my mother-in-law had given her, which caught me off guard. Despite the relaxed pace of my days away, I knew it was time to face the reality of the situation. "So Emma, how comfortable are you with computers?" I asked, sensing her hesitation. "Well, I mostly watch videos and play games online," she replied, hinting at her limited technical skills. Curious about her abilities, I asked about her experience with software like Word or Excel. Her confused response surprised me, given her background in the apparel industry in Philadelphia, where tasks like tracking sales and managing inventory would typically require basic computer knowledge. "Can you handle sales calculations or fill out documents?" I questioned further. She confidently said she could manage those tasks, but when I asked, "Can you calculate the correct amount of tax?" her confidence wavered, and she answered uncertainly. This wasn't just about testing Emma's math skills, but about seeing if she could apply them practically in a business context. While Emma had talents in other areas, it was evident she lacked confidence in the specific skills needed for the job. Her discomfort with calculations seemed to be a significant factor in the criticism from Liam and Samuel. It was essential for me to address the motives behind my mother-in-law's efforts to replace me. "Since you're taking over my role, I expect you to handle accounting tasks proficiently. Pay attention to email etiquette. A casual tone suitable for friends isn't appropriate for business. You'll also need to manage staff scheduling. Our team is small, but we prioritize everyone's time off requests, so don't put your convenience over theirs," I told her firmly. As I continued outlining her responsibilities, I could hear Emma crying on the other end of the line. It was a difficult conversation, but necessary for her to understand the reality and expectations of the role she was taking on. But I thought I wouldn't have much to do. Emma abruptly ended the call, clearly overwhelmed by the tasks ahead. I took the chance to explore Philadelphia, the city Emma had left behind. Surprisingly, I found the people there warmer than I expected, a stark contrast to the cold behavior of my mother-in-law Amanda and Emma, who seemed determined to push me away. A week after leaving my job, I returned to my in-laws' house. As soon as I arrived, Amanda confronted me, her face red with anger. "How dare you make my daughter cry? You won't get away with this," she yelled, her eyes filled with fury and confusion. Before she could reach me, Samuel and Liam stepped in to calm her down. Despite their efforts, Amanda's anger didn't subside. Emma's upset because she got in trouble for trying to boss around her employees without knowing how. Samuel explained calmly but firmly, trying to clear up the misunderstanding. "Mary hasn't been here for a week, so she couldn't have upset Emma." Emotionally, Amanda shot back, "It's all because of her. Mary is the reason for Emma's problems. She accused me without any evidence. Where's Emma anyway?" I asked, looking around, but she wasn't there, adding to the confusion. "It's strange. Emma doesn't have anywhere else to go since she gave up her apartment in Philadelphia. I thought she'd be here," I mused aloud. Samuel then explained, "Emma's locked herself in her room. She's been crying and doesn't want to go to work anymore. She's overwhelmed, mainly because she doesn't have the skills needed for the job." Amanda, still angry, accused me, "You've turned Samuel and Liam against me. They wouldn't say the company runs better with you instead of Emma unless you poisoned them against her." Samuel sighed deeply, clearly exhausted from the ongoing family conflict and his efforts to clear up misunderstandings. "Mom," he tried to explain again, "it might seem surprising, but Mary is exceptional at her job. She's certified in bookkeeping, her administrative skills are top-notch, and she's even fluent in Spanish from studying abroad. She handles all our multilingual communications of the company," he said proudly. Amanda looked surprised, evidently unaware of my qualifications and contributions. "That sounds like something from a TV show," she muttered, reflecting on the situation. I remember in college I was so focused on getting certifications and studying that I had little time for socializing or dating. That's when I met Samuel when he visited my company for business. I shared, trying to bridge the gap between misunderstandings and the reality of our lives. Realizing Amanda wasn't interested in my qualifications or past achievements, I refocused the conversation on the present situation. To sum up, I handle a wide range of tasks at the company, from accounting and scheduling to coordinating with other companies and managing employee shifts, I explained, detailing the breadth of my responsibilities. Samuel chimed in, "The work environment has improved significantly since you took a step back, Mom." His remark visibly surprised Amanda. Just then, Liam, Samuel's father, interjected with a startling revelation. "We're considering closing down the company soon." Emma made a serious error. Instead of completing some crucial documents, she opted to take phone calls because she thought it would be more enjoyable while we were away. She ended up being rude to an important contact from another company, which could have serious consequences. I was shocked, my hand covering my mouth in disbelief. "I can't believe Emma would do something like that," I murmured, filled with a sense of disbelief and dread over the potential implications for the company's future. As I pondered over these anxious thoughts, the story took another unexpected twist. When I explained our situation, the president of the other company suggested it might be time to consider merging. He expressed interest in absorbing our family business. Liam continued, revealing the surprising turn of events. This unexpected development brought a glimmer of hope. A merger could stabilize our customer base, a goal Samuel had been tirelessly working towards through his efforts in sales. Samuel and Liam felt relieved by the news, but Amanda had a different reaction. She immediately objected, "That's not acceptable. Samuel should be the president. This company belongs to us, doesn't it? He shouldn't just become an employee." Amanda exclaimed passionately, unwilling to entertain the idea of losing the status and control that came with owning the company. Her outburst drew Emma downstairs to see what was happening. Amid the chaos, Liam's calm but firm voice cut through the tension. "I am divorcing you. You have resisted change, neglected your duties at home and to the family, and I've learned about your involvement with younger men. I can no longer tolerate this behavior," he declared, shocking everyone present, including Samuel and me. Liam then placed divorce papers and a photo of Amanda with a young man on the table. "If you sign these papers now and take your belongings, I won't pursue alimony. Trying to get money from you would be futile," he stated firmly. "How can you say that? Haven't I dedicated myself to this household all these years?" Amanda protested. Liam countered, "Have you actually done any real housework in the last 8 years? Spending someone else's money on younger men doesn't count as dedication to this house," his frustration evident in his voice. It was an unprecedented display of firmness from Liam, typically known for his gentle demeanor, as he addressed long-standing family issues. The atmosphere was charged with tension and disbelief as Liam, usually composed and reserved, showed a side of himself that shocked everyone present, especially Emma, who had just entered the room. Her slight trembling betrayed her astonishment and fear at the unfolding scene. "Emma, this concerns you too," Liam declared firmly. "You returned because you couldn't make it on your own in Philadelphia. Now you're struggling to find a job here, yet you act as if you're above everyone else. You've stopped making an effort altogether, resorting to escapism. It's time for you to leave this house as well." Emma was stunned, her face showing a mix of confusion and denial. "Wait, Dad, maybe Mom has her issues, but I'm still your daughter, right?" she protested desperately, trying to maintain her place in the family. Amanda, hurt by her daughter's words, reacted with shock. "Are you turning against me now, Emma?" she accused, her voice filled with hurt and disbelief as tensions escalated. Liam intervened swiftly to prevent further conflict. "To avoid more trouble, I've arranged for both of you to stay with an acquaintance until you get back on your feet. They'll be here shortly to pick you up. Please gather your essential belongings," he instructed firmly, his tone brooking no argument. With heavy hearts and no other options, Amanda and Emma packed their belongings. Shortly after, an acquaintance of Liam's, who managed a factory with living arrangements, arrived to take them to their new temporary home. Meanwhile, Samuel, Liam, and I seized the opportunity to inform our employees about the upcoming merger of our company with a larger corporation, preparing them for the changes and challenges ahead. Amidst these significant life changes, I discovered that I was pregnant. I shared the joyful news with the president of the acquiring company, who responded with enthusiasm. He assured me they would find a suitable replacement for my role to ensure a smooth transition. With the promise of new beginnings and the excitement of our growing family, Samuel and Liam redoubled their dedication to the company, inspired by the bright future ahead.
Hi everyone, I'm Freddie, and I'm 21. My childhood wasn't happy. My dad, Carl, and I didn't get along. We used to be close, but everything changed when he divorced my mom and left us with a lot of money problems. It felt like he left me behind, like I didn't matter to him. He started a new life and focused on himself, his hobbies, and dating. After the divorce, my mom, Yasmin, and I had a tough time. We went from having a good life to struggling to make ends meet. My mom, Yasmin, worked very hard to take care of us after my dad left. She never gave up, even when things were tough. She started a small business and worked hard to make it grow. And it did. Our lives went from being difficult to being comfortable again. It was amazing to see my mom's strength and determination. But then something unexpected happened. My mom got sick. It was a big shock for us. The person who had fought so hard for us was now fighting a serious illness. It was a tough time for us, but we were determined to support her through it. My mom's illness turned our lives upside down. I took care of her and hoped she would get better. We tried everything, but sometimes things don't go as planned. Sadly, my mom passed away, leaving a huge gap in my life that can never be filled. As her only child, I had to face the difficult time after her death alone. While I was grieving, I found out that she had left her house to me. It was her last gift, showing me how much she loved me and the life we shared. When I entered the house, now mine, it felt like my mom was hugging me one last time. The house held many happy and sad memories of our time together. But what hurt me the most was that my dad, Carl, and his new wife, Rita, didn't even come to my mom's funeral. It was like he had completely forgotten about her and didn't care. This made me very angry. How could they be so cruel? Didn't my dad care about how I was feeling? Even months after my mom's death, the pain still felt fresh. I tried to find comfort in memories and friends, but I couldn't shake off the bitter feelings. The house my mom left me was beautiful, but it reminded me of her absence. I tried to make peace with the memories and make the house my own, but it took time. Things were getting better, until one day, my dad, Carl, showed up at my doorstep unexpectedly. It had been months since my mom's funeral, and he acted like nothing was wrong. I opened the door, and our eyes met. He looked surprised to see the pain and anger on my face. He tried to smile, but it didn't work. We stood there in awkward silence, with a lot of unspoken words between us. I was angry and disappointed, and it was hard to keep those feelings inside. Finally, he said, "Hey, Freddie, can we talk?" in a sorry tone, but it didn't feel sincere. His presence in my house brought up a mix of emotions, and I just stared at him. I wasn't fooled by my dad's weak attempt to make things right. "Don't pretend to apologize, Carl. I'm not buying it," I said, my voice filled with anger. "You left us to struggle while you lived a life of luxury. Now you show up like nothing's wrong." Carl's face turned red with anger, and he became defensive. "You need to respect me, Freddie," he said firmly. I laughed in disbelief. "Respect is earned, Carl. You lost mine when you abandoned us for your own desires. You can't demand respect after all the pain you caused." As we argued, I saw Rita getting out of their luxurious car and walking towards us. Seeing her only made me angrier, remembering how my dad chose a life of extravagance over his family. When she reached the doorstep, I said, "What brings you here, Rita? You didn't even come to my mom's funeral, but now you're here." Rita made a weak excuse. "We were busy, Freddie. We had commitments." Her words only made me angrier. "You were too busy to attend my mom's funeral? That shows how little you care about her memory and our family." I felt a surge of anger and frustration as I looked at my dad and Rita standing in front of me. They were still the same selfish people who showed off their wealth and indulged in luxuries. Their presence in my home, acting like nothing was wrong, made me even angrier. "What do you two want from me?" I asked them. "Haven't you hurt me enough already?" My dad, Carl, said, "Freddie, we need to talk. The truth is, our life isn't as great as it seems on social media. We're struggling financially, and we even need to sell the Aston Martin outside to get some money for something important." Rita, who had been quiet until then, took off her coat, revealing her pregnant belly. I was shocked and angry. "You're telling me that you got someone pregnant who's young enough to be my sister? This is a sick joke, right?" I said, my voice filled with anger. Carl, now getting defensive, said some very hurtful things to me. His words were mean and unexpected, and I couldn't believe my father could be so cruel. "You think you're so smart, talking to me like that. I left you and your mom because I couldn't stand being around someone as stupid as you. You're useless and hopeless." I didn't do anything wrong, so shut up. I was shocked and couldn't believe what I was hearing. I just stood there, refusing to accept that my father was speaking to me like this in my own home. Get out, I said firmly. Get out before I call the police. Leave my property. Carl smiled slyly and said, Actually, that's why we're here. What do you mean? I asked, my anger rising again. You're going to have to leave this house, Fred. It's the only option, Carl said, his eyes gleaming with a sinister intent. I was furious, my heart racing with anger. You're crazy, Carl. My mom gave me this house, the woman you abandoned. You think you can just take it away? Never. You think you deserve this house? Think again, Freddie. We need a bigger and better space for our growing family, Carl said, his words dripping with audacity. My anger was burning brighter than ever. How could he want to start a new family after leaving us just a couple of years ago? He's insane. You think I'll just leave? My name is on the deed, Carl. This house is legally mine, and you can't take it away, I said, standing my ground. Carl sneered at me. Are you sure about that, Freddie? I have connections. I know the county clerk, and a simple phone call could make your name on that deed to disappear. I was even angrier now. How dare he use his connections to manipulate the system and take what was mine? You'd stoop that low to steal this house from me? You're no better than a common criminal, I said, my voice strong and forceful. They were taken aback by my intensity. But as they realized they weren't going to win, they looked nervous and scared. They knew they had underestimated me and my determination to protect what was mine and my mom's. With all my strength, I yelled at them to leave my property immediately. They turned pale and finally left the house they had tried to take. Even though he was scared, Carl still tried to intimidate me with threats of ruining my life. You'll regret not listening to me, Fred, Carl said. I tried to be nice, but you didn't want that. Just wait, you'll be begging for mercy when I'm done with you. After they left, I was left standing there, my heart racing with anger, frustration, and determination. I knew this battle was far from over. In the silence that followed, I felt a sense of urgency. I knew my father had more power and influence than I did, and his connections and willingness to bend the rules posed a big threat to my dreams of keeping this house. I understood it wouldn't be easy. It wasn't just a fight for a physical space, it was a battle against a system that favored the powerful and well-connected. But I wasn't willing to give up. I would fight hard to protect the legacy my mother left me. The house represented memories, love, and sacrifices. It was a symbol of my identity and my journey towards freedom. With newfound determination, I took a deep breath and prepared myself for the tough journey ahead. The fight for justice had just begun. Weeks after our confrontation, my father still sent me hateful messages and threats. I ignored them, knowing they were meant to hurt me. Instead, I collected evidence, saved every message, and wrote down every word he said. I knew I had to take action, so I went to the county clerk's office. This was the place where my father's plan could become a reality, but I wasn't afraid. I had to face the person who had the power to make decisions. As I entered the office, my heart raced with anxiety and determination. I approached the clerk's desk, where a middle-aged man with tired eyes looked up at me. "Excuse me, sir," I said. "I need to talk to you about something important." The county clerk looked at me with curiosity and skepticism, studying my appearance. "What do you want?" he asked gruffly. I gathered all my courage and poured my heart out to the county clerk, sharing my story and all the struggles my mom and I had faced. I told him about Carl's absence at my mom's funeral and the threats that still haunted me. I showed him the evidence of Carl's manipulation and begged him to see the truth. As I spoke, the clerk's expression changed from indifference to genuine concern. "Please, sir, understand the truth," I pleaded. "Carl has twisted the story to make himself the victim. Don't let him deceive you and take what's rightfully mine. I'm all alone and need your help." The clerk's eyes softened, and he leaned back in his chair, taking a moment to process what I said. "I had no idea," he said, shaking his head. "I have a son around your age, and I can't imagine what you're going through. Carl made himself out to be the victim, saying you were a spoiled brat, but something didn't feel right. Maybe that's why I was hesitant when he asked for his favor." I had a feeling something was wrong, but I didn't realize it was this serious, he said. His words were like a shock to my already hurting heart, but they gave me hope that someone was finally listening. I felt a glimmer of hope that things might work out fairly. Thank you for listening, sir, I said, my voice full of thanks. Your understanding means a lot to me. I just want you to see the truth behind Carl's lies. The county clerk nodded, looking determined. I'll do what's right, but you have to promise not to tell anyone that I'm doing this as a favor. Sometimes I help my friends in ways that aren't exactly legal, so if you tell anyone, I'll find you and make sure you regret it. I swallowed hard, scared of the man in front of me. Honestly, sir, I don't care if you're not following all the rules. I just want to make sure my house is mine and my father can't control it. I've got it, he said firmly. I believe you've been through a lot, and you shouldn't have to worry about owning your house again. Leaving the office, I felt a huge weight lifted off my shoulders. The battle wasn't over yet, but I had hope that the truth would come out and I would get what was mine. I went to my father's house, but it looked empty and abandoned. The fancy furniture was gone, probably sold to prepare for the new baby. After waiting for a long time, Carl finally opened the door, looking terrible. He hadn't slept or showered in days, and seeing me made him even angrier. What do you want? Carl growled. I just came to tell you something, I said, standing up for myself. I'm keeping the house and you can't make me leave. So give up trying. Like hell you are? Carl yelled, his face red with anger. I'm your father and I get to decide. You're no father to me, just a pest. I shot back, my anger rising. Carl sneered. We'll see about that. I always get what I want. I smiled, feeling triumphant. I already talked to the county clerk, and he's on my side. I have the papers right here, and the house is mine. Carl's face contorted in shock and horror as he realized his plan was falling apart. He stuttered, trying to find words, but I just laughed, celebrating my win. You can't tell anyone I tried to help you, or we'll both get in trouble, Carl said, his voice desperate. Looks like you and Rita need to start house hunting. I taunted, rubbing it in. Carl's face fell. Actually, Rita is leaving me. She's not happy that I couldn't get your house quickly enough, and she's given me an ultimatum. I shrugged. That's tough for you. Carl's eyes begged me. Freddie, please, let me move in with you. I can't take it here anymore. Everything is too much for me. I haven't slept or eaten, and Rita is driving me crazy with her demands. I laughed. You're still acting like a child, even at your age. You think I'm going to let you stay with me? Think again. Try a homeless shelter. They might have room for you. Carl's face twisted in anger. You're a heartless and thoughtless person. You'll regret this, Freddie. I smiled. I'm not scared of you, Carl. You're getting what you deserve. Karma's a bitch, isn't it? As I walked away, I knew Carl's life was going downhill. He became a social outcast, and his alcohol addiction took over. I heard Rita divorced him, took most of his money, and left him alone and hopeless in a hotel room, struggling to figure out his next move. But I knew I had won, and I was ready to fight for anything my mother left me. Carl would never dare to confront me with the same anger and entitlement again. I was no longer a kid, and I had a lot to lose. I'll fight for anything my mother left me, I said firmly. And if he's foolish enough to try me again, I'll make sure he regrets it. Having me as a so-called useless daughter-in-law must be such a disappointment. At least that's how she always made me feel. Her mocking laughter rang through the phone, leaving me stunned. The arrogance in her voice and her blatant disregard for me ignited a surge of anger. She had always treated me like I was nothing, but this time her cruelty went too far. As the rest area faded into the distance, I realized I was completely alone. Moments ago, I had been with my family, but now they had abandoned me. Confusion and fear swept over me, yet her cold, cutting words echoed in my mind. You who just sit around the house don't deserve to stay at a hotel. My chest tightened. Despite all my hard work, she never acknowledged my efforts. I ran an inn with dedication and managed every detail to perfection. Yet she clung to her narrative, intent on destroying my self-worth. On her end of the call, I could hear relatives laughing, their mockery amplifying my isolation. Her influence had turned the entire family against me. Even my husband refused to defend me. Anger and sadness churned inside me. The humiliation, the dismissal of my contributions, and now this outright betrayal. It was too much. Her sneering face and contemptuous eyes filled my mind. Her obsession with pushing me away felt suffocating. Something inside me snapped. A decision crystallized in my mind: no more. I drew a deep breath and held my phone tightly, my fingers trembling, not with fear, but with the raw power of long-suppressed rage. My heart raced, fueled by a newfound determination. "Hello," I said, dialing with shaky fingers. My voice was calm, steady, yet brimming with resolve. "I have a favor to ask." This was the beginning of reclaiming my life. It was also the first step toward an unexpected revenge. My name is Maya Smith, age 40. I'm a manager at a large corporation. I met my husband, Tom, in our late 30s. After dating for 6 months, we decided to marry. In the beginning, he was attentive and kind, but over time, he grew indifferent. Now, our conversations are minimal, and he barely notices my presence. Still, I accepted it, convincing myself this was just the way things were. One evening, as I cleaned up after dinner, Tom spoke to me unexpectedly. "Hey, Maya, I need to talk to you." "Oh, what's up?" I replied, smiling, pleased he was addressing me directly for once. "My family is planning a trip, about 20 relatives. They want me to handle the hotel reservations and organize the itinerary." "Really? That sounds like a big task." "Well, I'm busy with work, and you've got more days off than I do. So you take care of it. Find a cheap place, since I'm paying for everything. If you're coming, pitch in too." I wanted to point out that I worked hard and upheld my responsibilities just as much as he did, even if I had slightly more flexibility. But I bit my tongue. For once, he was asking for my help, and I wanted to oblige. Spending time with his family wasn't exactly enticing, but this was for him. "Okay," I said. "I'll handle everything." "Thanks. Just pick a place that won't embarrass us in front of my family." With that, he lay back on the couch, scrolling through his phone. After finishing the cleanup, I retreated to the bedroom and made a call to a familiar contact. "Hi, it's me. I need a favor," I said, my voice calm yet purposeful. A few days later, Tom's parents arrived at our apartment. When I had shared the travel plans with Tom, he insisted we invite them over to go through the details in person. As they stepped inside, Tom's mother, Elaine, made a beeline for my kitchen cabinets and began rummaging through them without hesitation. "Maya, are you seriously eating gourmet instant curry from a hotel? How indulgent. You should be cooking for Tom instead of living off things like this," she remarked with mock disapproval, pulling out a few packets. Without asking, she casually dropped them into her bag. This was nothing new. Every time Elaine visited, she treated my kitchen like her personal shopping aisle, helping herself to groceries, canned goods, and even decorative items. Once, she took a set of dishes without a word. Her justification was always the same: "Anything in my son's house is fair game. What's wrong with me taking it?" After that, I started hiding my favorite items before their visits. Tom's father, Rick, stood idly by, laughing as Elaine continued her spree. Once she was done shopping, she finally sat down. Timing it perfectly, I presented the hotel details. "Here's where we'll be staying," I said, pulling up the website for the luxury hotel I had booked. I handed them my phone to show off the sleek images of the newly opened property. Elaine glanced at it, her lips curling into a dismissive scoff. "Well, aren't you getting above your station? How are you affording this?" Fortunately, I managed to negotiate a group discount under Tom's name. I replied evenly. "I thought you were useless, but I guess you can handle something like this," she said, her tone haughty. Her words stung, but I didn't let it show. What Elaine didn't know, and what I hadn't shared, was the truth about the hotel. It was part of my own business. My family had operated a modest inn for years, but after it gained media attention, bookings skyrocketed. With the surge in demand, especially from international tourists, we expanded into high-end hospitality. I had been managing the new luxury property ever since. Tom knew my family owned the business, but he had no idea I was running such a prestigious hotel. I had kept it a secret, fearing it would create tension. Tom had once complained about my income surpassing his, so I downplayed my career whenever it came up. Over time, I resolved not to share the full extent of my success with him or his parents. "I'm sure you'll love it," I said with a polite smile. "The place is beautiful and the hospitality is exceptional." Elaine gave me a skeptical look. "We'll see. I'll keep my expectations low." Then, without missing a beat, she added, Since we're here, let's do some shopping. And we should grab dinner at a nice restaurant too. She completely ignored my offer to cook a meal and left shortly after. The day of the trip finally arrived. Tom, his parents, and I set off in his car, planning to meet the rest of the family at the hotel. Elaine, seated in the back, couldn't resist her usual jabs. Tom, isn't it time you replace this old car? You shouldn't be driving around in something so shabby. Tom sighed, keeping his eyes on the road. I'd love to, but it's not in the budget. I glanced at him, feeling a pang of sympathy. This trip was already expensive, and I knew how much pressure he was under to impress his family. Oh, I'll pay for it. I can't stand the idea of my son driving around in such a junker, Elaine said with a dramatic sigh from the backseat. Really? Thanks, Mom. Tom replied, brightening immediately. Of course. We'll go to the dealership together next week and pick out something more impressive. They continued chatting as if I weren't sitting right there beside Tom in the front seat. Moments like this had become the norm with his family. But that didn't make it hurt any less. You know, Elaine mused, her tone turning sharp, if only there were grandkids along for this trip. But I guess at this point, it's too late to hope for that. Well, that's what happens when you marry a woman who's already past her prime. Mom, Dad, can you not? Tom muttered, but he didn't press further, letting their cruel comments hang in the air. I kept quiet, staring out the window, regretting ever agreeing to come along. After a long silence, I finally spoke up softly. Tom, I need to use the restroom. Can we stop at the next service area? Elaine immediately rolled her eyes. Couldn't you have gone before we left? This is why we're always late. I'm sorry. I'll be quick, I assured her. Tom pulled into the next service area, and I hurried inside. The line for the women's restroom was long, and I nervously glanced at my watch, worried about holding everyone up. After 10 minutes, I finally emerged, only to find the parking space where Tom's car had been now empty. Confused, I looked around, wondering if I had somehow missed them. I called Tom, but he didn't answer. Slowly, the realization sank in. After a few more failed attempts to reach him, I tried Elaine instead. She answered immediately. Oh, hello, Maya. Something wrong? I'm still at the service area, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Did something happen? Oh, we're already at the hotel, she replied, her tone dripping with disdain. Trips like these are for family, you know. You're just an outsider tagging along. Her words hit like a punch to the gut. Elaine, you're already spoiled with what my son provides without working or contributing. You can sit this one out, she cut me off, her mocking laughter ringing through the line. In the background, I could hear other family members laughing too. Then, without waiting for a response, she hung up. I stood there stunned. The weight of her words settled over me as I fought against the despair creeping in. I had worked tirelessly to organize this trip, putting my own responsibilities on hold, only to be abandoned like this. But feeling sorry for myself wouldn't solve anything. I faced worse as a hotel manager, handling crises with composure. Drawing on that strength, I took a deep breath and called the hotel. Hello, this is Maya. I have a reservation under Smith. Could you confirm it, please? After ensuring everything was in order, I made another call. Hi, it's Maya, I said to my assistant at the main office. I'm stranded at a service area and need a ride to the hotel. Of course, Ms. Smith. I'll send a car right away, she replied. Relieved, I hung up. Soon, I'd be back on track. Meanwhile, in the car, Elaine gloated to Tom. That woman's never been a good fit for you. She's too old for kids and not exactly a catch. Mom, enough, Tom said, though his voice lacked conviction. I'm just saying, you deserve someone who's actually a family person, she continued. Tom sat in silence, torn but unable to find the courage to defend me. Later, at the hotel, Tom and his family settled into their luxurious rooms, enjoying the evening as if nothing had happened. They gathered in the dining area for an elaborate meal. Tom really went all out with this place, Rick said, looking around in approval. This hotel is famous nationwide. I hope it didn't cost too much. Well, Maya handled the arrangements, Tom admitted, trying to sound casual. I'm covering it, of course. That's what a good husband does. Tom's unease was evident, but he tried to push it aside and enjoy the moment. The next morning, as the family prepared to check out, they assumed all charges were already covered. But as they gathered in the lobby, the hotel manager approached them. Excuse me, here's your final bill, he said, handing Tom a detailed statement. Tom frowned as he glanced at the total. His eyes widened. The charges included a suite upgrade, additional services, and the group's special rate. Wait, Tom stammered. Why is this so much more than expected? I thought everything was handled with a discount. I apologize, sir, the manager said with polite firmness, but the discounted rate was only available if the owner was present. Tom frowned, his confusion evident. The owner? Who's that supposed to be? That would be Maya Smith, your wife. The room fell silent. Tom's face paled and a hush settled over the family. Elaine clutched her purse tightly, as though holding onto it could somehow make the charges vanish. You mean she, Maya, owns this hotel? Tom stammered, his voice shaky. The manager gave a calm nod. Yes, she's the owner. Since she wasn't present, the discounted rate is void. The total amount due now is $20,000. Elaine gasped, her grip on her purse tightening further. Tom, do something. This must be some kind of mistake. I didn't know, Tom stuttered, looking increasingly flustered. I didn't realize Maya was the owner. The manager extended the bill with a steady hand. How would you like to settle this? The other relatives began murmuring among themselves, shifting uncomfortably. You didn't know she owned this place, and she paid for everything, someone whispered. Tom's gaze fell to the floor, unable to meet their eyes. Meanwhile, I arrived at the hotel, determined to face Tom and his family. The staff greeted me warmly. Welcome back, Miss Smith, the manager said with a respectful smile. Everything has been handled as you requested. I thanked him and headed to the lobby. As I entered, I spotted Tom and his family at the counter, their expressions a mix of embarrassment and unease. Squaring my shoulders, I approached them, my head held high. Good morning, everyone, I said, my voice calm but firm. I see you're having a lovely time. The shock on their faces was almost comical. Elaine was the first to recover, her tone thick with false sweetness. Maya, dear, we were just surprised. We didn't realize you were the owner here. I'm sure you didn't, I replied evenly, but I hope my outsider status no longer concerns you. Maya, listen, Tom began, but I held up a hand to stop him. No, you listen. You left me behind because I wasn't family enough. But I'm the reason you're even here, and I paid for everything. A heavy silence followed. No one dared to look at me, their eyes cast downward. Now about that bill, I added, my tone resolute. No more discounts. Consider it payment for the years of disrespect. Without waiting for a response, I turned and walked away, a sense of closure settling over me. I left them to figure out how to handle the cost on their own. Later that day, I decided to check out of my hotel suite and head home. The decision felt symbolic, leaving behind not just the trip, but Tom and his family, once and for all. Back in my suite, I packed my bags, reflecting on everything I had endured. This trip had been a turning point, a realization that I deserved respect and appreciation, things I'd never received from Tom or his family. As I was finishing up, the manager knocked on the door and entered carrying a parting gift. Miss Smith, thank you for your continued partnership and for trusting us. We hope this is just the beginning of many more successful ventures. Thank you, I replied, smiling. This hotel feels like a second home to me, and you've helped make it truly special. Checking out of the hotel felt like stepping into a new chapter. A powerful sense of freedom washed over me. Freedom from the past, from constant judgment, and from the weight of others' expectations. In the days that followed, I filed for divorce, finally choosing myself over a loveless marriage. I poured my energy into expanding the family business, opening more luxury inns, and pursuing dreams I'd shelved for far too long. Surprisingly, news of my divorce and Tom's mounting financial troubles soon spread, but I didn't dwell on it. My new life was brimming with purpose, community, and growth, surrounded by people who respected me and believed in my vision. On quiet evenings, I'd raise a glass to myself, grateful for the strength to walk away and build a life on my own terms. Happiness, I realized, was something I could claim for myself, and I wasn't looking back. I never thought my sister's wedding would be the day everything changed. Looking back, I should have known something was wrong when my invitation arrived 3 days before the ceremony. Kitchen staff entrance only, it read in elegant gold script with a crude arrow drawn pointing to the back of the venue. My sister Victoria had always been the golden child. While I chose to work with underprivileged children as a teacher, she climbed a corporate ladder with perfectly manicured nails and designer heels. Our parents never let me forget the difference between us. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" Mom would say, shaking her head at my simple clothes and practical shoes. "Look at her, engaged to James Anderson, CEO of Anderson Industries. And what do you have to show for yourself?" What they didn't know was that I had plenty to show, just not in ways they could understand. My small apartment might not be impressive, but the smiles of my students when they finally grasp a difficult concept, those are worth more than any luxury condo. Still, I went to the wedding. Victoria was my sister, after all, even as she'd grown more distant since getting engaged to James. I put on my best dress, not designer, but elegant in its simplicity, and drove my old Honda Civic to the Grand Plaza Hotel. The security guard at the main entrance took one look at my invitation and pointed to the back. "Service entrance only," he said gruffly. I found myself walking through the hotel's kitchen, dodging busy staff preparing for what was clearly going to be an extravagant reception. A hostess led me to a small table tucked behind a large pillar, practically hidden from the main celebration. Victoria's instructions were very clear, she said apologetically. Family members who might embarrass the couple should be kept out of sight. My hands trembled as I sat down. The table was set with plastic utensils, while I could see fine china gleaming on the other tables. A handwritten note in my sister's flowing script sat next to the plastic fork. "Know your place, little sister. Don't ruin this for me." I should have left then. Should have walked out and never looked back. But something made me stay. Perhaps the same stubborn determination that made me choose teaching over the corporate career my parents demanded. The ceremony was beautiful, of course. I watched from my hidden corner as Victoria floated down the aisle in a gown that probably cost more than my yearly salary. James Anderson waited at the altar, tall and distinguished in his custom tuxedo. He was handsome in that polished way that Grace magazine covers, but something about his expression seemed strained. Then he saw me. In that moment, as his eyes met mine across the crowded room, James Anderson, CEO of Anderson Industries, did something completely unexpected. He dropped his wedding ring. The small golden band made a distinct ping as it hit the marble floor and rolled, coming to rest right at my feet. As I bent to pick it up, memories from 15 years ago came flooding back. I was 19, working my way through college at a small coffee shop in Boston. He was 22, a regular customer who always ordered the same thing: black coffee, no sugar. Back then, he wasn't James Anderson, CEO. He was just Jamie, a graduate student with dreams of changing the world through ethical business practices. We'd spent 6 beautiful months together, sharing dreams and plans for the future. He wanted to revolutionize corporate responsibility. I wanted to teach. We talked about combining our passions somehow, maybe starting a foundation for education. Then he disappeared. No explanation, no goodbye. Just vanished from my life completely. I tried to find him, but it was like he never existed. A year later, I saw his photo in a business magazine. James Anderson, heir to Anderson Industries, engaged to a wealthy socialite. My heart broke all over again. Now here he was, staring at me like he'd seen a ghost, while my sister, his bride, watched in confusion. "Jamie," I whispered, holding out his wedding ring. The color drained from his face. Victoria's perfectly plucked eyebrows furrowed in confusion. "James, darling, do you know my pathetic little sister?" But James wasn't looking at his bride anymore. His eyes were fixed on my left hand, where I still wore the small silver ring he'd given me 15 years ago at that coffee shop in Boston. The one with the inscription, "To my Emma who taught me what really matters." "Emma," he breathed, and in that one word, I heard 15 years of regret. Victoria's voice turned sharp. "James, what's going on?" Before he could answer, a distinguished older man rose from the front row. Richard Anderson Sr., James's father and founder of Anderson Industries. His face was thunderous as he approached the altar. "Son," his voice carried across the suddenly silent room. "Please tell me this isn't the same Emma." The same Emma. The words hung in the air like storm clouds. What did he mean? The same Emma. James straightened his spine, and for a moment, I saw the Jamie I used to know, the one who wanted to change the world. Yes, father, he said clearly. This is Emma Chen, the woman you paid $5 million to disappear 15 years ago. The room erupted in chaos. Victoria's perfect wedding dissolved into chaos. Guests began whispering, phones recording everything. My sister's face had turned an interesting shade of red that clashed horribly with her white dress. $5 million? I stood up slowly, my teacher's salary suddenly feeling very different. You paid me to disappear? Richard Anderson Sr. straightened his expensive tie. I paid your mother. She assured me you'd never contact James again. Said you agreed it was for the best. My mother. Of course. The pieces started falling into place. Mom's sudden insistence that I transfer universities that year, the mysterious deposit in my college fund, her constant reminders that James, was out of my league. You knew? I turned to my mother, who was trying to disappear into her seat. You took money to separate us? It was for your own good. Mom stood, her designer dress rustling. Look at you, a teacher living in a tiny apartment. James needed someone who could understand his world. Victoria was perfect for him. Perfect. James laughed bitterly. Perfect for the company image, you mean? Just like that socialite you tried to set me up with after Emma left. Did you tell Victoria about that too, father? How you've been orchestrating my relationships for 15 years? Victoria finally found her voice. James, darling, surely you're not comparing my worthless sister to me. I mean, look at her dress, it's not even designer. No, James said quietly, it's handmade. Emma always said the most valuable things are made with love, not money. He turned to me. You still make your own clothes. I nodded throat tight, he remembered. This is ridiculous. Richard Anderson Sr. boomed. Son, you have responsibilities. The merger with Victoria's father's company. The merger? James's voice turned cold. Is that what this wedding is really about, father? Another business deal? Victoria went pale. What do you mean, a business deal? Oh, didn't you know? James turned to her. Your father's company is failing. This marriage would save it. That's why he pushed so hard for you to date me, isn't it? Victoria's father jumped up. Now see here. But James wasn't finished. He reached into his tuxedo jacket and pulled out a USB drive. I found some interesting documents last week, father, about what really happened 15 years ago, about the real reason you wanted Emma gone. Richard Anderson Sr.'s face turned ashen. James. Emma wasn't just my girlfriend back then, James continued, his voice carrying across the silent room. She was also volunteering at a youth center in South Boston, a youth center that was about to be demolished for one of our developments, a development that would have displaced hundreds of families. I remembered that fight. The community had been organizing protests, and I'd been helping them. James had been supportive, even talked about finding alternative locations for the development. Emma was organizing the community, James went on. She was good at it too, really good. The media was starting to pay attention. If that development had failed, it would have cost the company millions. But more importantly, it would have shown that Anderson Industries could be beaten. That's why she had to go, isn't it, father? Richard Anderson Sr. collapsed into his chair. So you paid her mother to make her disappear. James's voice was ice. You destroyed evidence of our relationship. You even donated to her new university to ensure she'd be accepted for a transfer. Also perfectly arranged. I did what was necessary for the company, his father muttered. The company? James laughed. The company that's now mine? He turned to the shocked guests. Oh yes, as of last week, I'm the majority shareholder. Father signed over control as an early wedding gift. Ironic, isn't it? He walked over to me, ignoring Victoria's squeak of protest. Emma, he said softly, I spent 15 years thinking you'd abandoned me. 15 years trying to be the son my father wanted. Then last week, I found these documents and I finally understood. I was going to stop the wedding. But then I saw your name on the guest list. Seated in the kitchen, I added dryly. Of course, he smiled. Victoria always did have a flair for drama. He turned to my sister. The wedding's off, by the way. You might want to check your father's company's financials before he tries to arrange another merger. Victoria screamed, throwing her bouquet at us. It hit a champagne pyramid instead, sending crystal glasses crashing to the floor. As my first act as CEO, James announced over the chaos, Anderson Industries is establishing a $100 million foundation for educational initiatives in underserved communities. He looked at me. We need a director who understands both education and community organizing. Interested? My mother jumped up. Emma, darling, I always knew you had potential. Save it, I cut her off. I think you've done enough helping for one lifetime. I turned to James. The foundation job, does it come with a corner office? He grinned. Only if you'll have dinner with me first. I know this little coffee shop in Boston. You can't do this, Victoria shrieked. Daddy, do something. But her father was already rushing out, phone in hand, probably calling his accountant. Richard Anderson Sr. stood up shakily. Son, think about what you're doing. Oh, I have, Father. For 15 years. James took my hand. The company's image could use some updating, don't you think? Less corporate greed, more social responsibility. Emma always said the measure of success isn't how much money you make, but how many lives you improve. My sister launched into another screaming fit, but I barely heard her. I was looking at the small silver ring I'd never taken off, remembering a young man in a coffee shop who wanted to change the world. You kept it, James said softly, touching the ring. You came back, I replied. 6 months later, the Anderson Chen Educational Foundation had already funded 50 community programs. Victoria eventually married a minor European prince, who ironically believed in socialist policies. My parents suddenly became very interested in charitable giving, though their invitations to family events mysteriously get lost in the mail. Richard Anderson Sr. retired to a villa in Italy, though he did send a surprisingly heartfelt letter of apology. I framed it next to the newspaper article about our foundation's launch. As for me and James, we still go to that coffee shop in Boston. He still orders black coffee, no sugar. But now when we talk about changing the world, we actually do it. The small silver ring finally has a companion. A simple gold band that matches it perfectly. The inscription, to my James, who came back to what really matters. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about getting it right.
I must share something difficult with you. My girlfriend, who is 20 years younger than me, is expecting a child. I have a preference for younger partners, so I've made the decision to get a divorce. Is that okay with you? All right. If you want a divorce, go ahead, but please take good care of our son. What? You should take the boy with you. Haven't you spoiled him enough? No, I can't. Because he is? I closed my mouth right there. If this conversation were to remain between us, there wouldn't be any problem. However, Ken must have overheard it from his place in the room. What would he think if he heard this? That was my only concern. Still, I must respond. Otherwise, this man will not understand the gravity of the situation. Destroying our happiness and only thinking about his own, that's too selfish. I won't stand for it. Just as our happiness was taken away, I want to take his away too. Driven by such feelings, I decided to confront Ted with a shocking truth. My name is Mila Davis. I am 41 years old, living with my husband Ted and our high school junior son Ken. I married Ted 13 years ago when I was 28. Back then, I was an insurance saleswoman visiting various companies to sell insurance. That's when I met Ted, who was working at a local import-export business, having recently divorced his wife. My wife cheated on me and left me. Now I'm living with my 5-year-old son, just the two of us, and it's pretty lonely, he said, looking somewhat sorrowful. Every time I visited Ted's company for work, I started talking to him. Eventually, Ted asked me, "Would you like to go out together?" But we never went out, just the two of us, because Ted always brought his son Ken along. He can't stay at home alone, right? I'd really love for you to be my son's new mom, but I guess you wouldn't want to marry a man with a child, he said. Seeing him like that, I thought he truly cherishes his child. If he could care for a child like that, then surely he'd care for his family. So I decided to marry Ted. But that was all a performance to marry me. In fact, as soon as we got married, Ted changed. I quit my job and became a housewife. Housework and childcare became my job, which wasn't a problem. But Ted started neglecting Ken. Before our marriage, he even brought Ken along on our dates. But after our marriage, he didn't even look at Ken, not just on weekdays, but even on weekends. Ted never talked to Ken, never took him out, never played with him, nothing. Even after Ken started elementary school, Ted's attitude didn't change. I went to all the school events alone, and he totally ignored all events that parents should join and enjoy together. You could at least attend some of the school events with Ken, I told him once. Ted made a grimace, signed annoyance, and said, "Sorry, but I'm just tired from work." What? Oh, be quiet. Taking care of our son is your job as his mother, right? Just do it properly, he shouted, ending the conversation. What happened to the man I knew before we got married? I felt a twinge of regret. Then, one day, Ken had just come home from elementary school and was helping me prepare dinner when a message from Ted arrived on my phone. Wait, what? He's bringing his subordinates home from now on. Apparently, he was going to bring several colleagues home. Ted had just been promoted to team leader, so he probably wanted to deepen his relationship with his new subordinates. What should I do? We don't have any food stored. They would surely end up drinking at our home. And if that's the case, we'll need some snacks. It's not even an hour's drive from the office to our home. After some thought, I decided to go to the nearby supermarket to buy some ingredients. When I arrived home, I immediately started cooking in a rush. I'll help too, offered Ken. Oh, thank you. Then, could you please get the dishes ready? We worked hard, but there were limits to what we could prepare. Ted arrived home when only about half of the preparations were done. I'm home. Hey, I brought my colleagues, Ted shouted at the entrance. I greeted them briefly and led them to the room, serving beer and snacks. As I contemplated the next dish, Ted came into the kitchen and asked, "Hey, what's happening with the food?" I told you in advance. I'm cooking right now. There are snacks, so it should be okay for now. What have you been doing? If you could notify me a bit earlier, stop complaining. You should have this ready. Do you want me to be embarrassed? I was shouted at and left speechless. There were countless things I wanted to rebut, but the sound in the kitchen could be heard in the living room. The guests must have felt uncomfortable too. Thinking so, I couldn't say anything in response. In the end, I silently endured our guests, but once they had left, I had a big fight with Ted. I was angry at Ted for shouting at me just because of his own convenience. Ted puckered his lips and said in a childish manner, "Okay, fine. I'll have a party and some venues from now on. Happy now." After that, Ted started hanging out more. His spending got wilder, and he would head out early on his days off. By then, Ken had become a 7th grade student, and it started costing money for things like after-school programs. That's when I talked to Ted about wanting to start a part-time job. A part-time job. What, you want money for leisure? No, that's not it. It's for things like Ken's tuition for the after-school programs. Oh, I see. Do whatever you want. Even though Ted, perhaps because he was drunk, gave a careless response, I got his word, and so I started a part-time job as an insurance agent. I asked a former boss from the company I worked at before marriage to make me a part-time employee. This should make things a little easier. Even then, because Ted complained, I couldn't slack off on housework. The time I could work was limited, and I had to prepare dinner before Ted got home. I managed my time well and kept working. Then, one day, I accidentally let work run late. I hurried home, but Ted had already returned. As soon as he saw me, Ted asked with a sullen face, "Where have you been?" I was at my part-time job. Part-time job? You weren't cheating on me, were you? Ted stared at me intently. There's no way that's true. I denied it firmly, but Ted kept looking at me with suspicious eyes. Just as I was wondering what to do, Ted reached out for my smartphone. Let me see. I'll check if there are any men's names. Stop it. Shut up. Ted forcefully snatched my phone and began to check the contacts. He quickly found my boss's name. Hey, who's this? It's a man's name, isn't it? He's your lover, ain't he? All right then. Before I could react, Ted dialed my boss. Stop it. You just keep quiet. Thankfully, the misunderstanding was cleared up quickly. I extended my sincere apologies to my boss, urging Ted to do the same. However, he simply looked away, blaming me for making the situation appear dubious. Your fault for making it look like you're doing something wrong, he insisted. Since then, our relationship took a downward turn. Even as Ken progressed to the 9th grade, nothing changed. I couldn't help but question whether it was okay to continue in this strained relationship. Despite my concerns, I struggled to find a way to mend our relationship. Before I knew it, Ken had become a senior in high school, preparing for college. Recently, the atmosphere between Ted and me had turned icy, and arguments at home became rare. At least this way, it wouldn't adversely affect Ken's studies. I thought things could remain like this until Ken entered college. Then, one day, my job required me to be near Ted's workplace. If our relationship had been better, I would have invited him to lunch. As I muttered this, I noticed Ted's car across the intersection. Wait, is that Ted? With who? Squinting, I saw 2 people laughing and chatting, and the word infidelity flashed in my mind. Accusing others of infidelity while doing it yourself, what a joke. I was too stunned to say anything. Secretly, I took a picture of them and went to a private detective to investigate Ted. I probably knew the answer already. The idea of divorce was already planted in my mind. But evidence was crucial, so I waited for the results of the investigation. About a month later, the results arrived, and they were damning. He really had the nerve. Just divorcing didn't seem enough anymore. How should I get back at him? On a certain day off, lost in my thoughts, Ted, who was supposed to be out, came home unexpectedly. Rushing over to me, he explained, "I'm sorry, but my girlfriend, who's 20 years younger, is pregnant." What? I couldn't believe my ears, but there he was, a smirk on his face, declaring, "So yeah, my girlfriend, who's 20 years younger, is pregnant. I prefer younger women, so I'm gonna divorce you. That's fine, right?" Well, he certainly had the guts to confess his affair himself. However, I saw this as an opportunity. With this in mind, I decided to seize the moment. "Go ahead and get married, but please take care of our son." With a smile on my face, I said this, seemingly catching Ted off guard. "What? You should take our son with you. I've always been so fond of him." "I don't want to, because that boy is—" I carefully chose my words, aware that Ken, studying in his room, could hear me. What would he think if he heard this? That was my only concern. Nevertheless, if I didn't stand up to him now, he wouldn't understand the gravity of the situation. It was far too convenient for him to destroy our happiness and go off to find his own. I wouldn't let that happen. I wanted to snatch away his happiness, just like ours was taken from us, driven by these thoughts. I decided to confront Ted with a truth that would stun him. "I hate to break it to you, but isn't Ken your son?" "He's not mine." "What are you talking about? We're married, right?" "If we're married, then our child is our child, right?" Ted declared, looking smug. At that moment, I was at a loss for words. Is this guy an idiot? He's 4 years older than me, and he knows nothing. I was too stunned to say anything, surprised at his lack of understanding. I exhaled deeply and hit Ted with the truth. "Ken is your child with your ex-wife, right?" "So what?" "In other words, to me, Ken is your stepchild. To make a stepchild one's own, one must adopt them." "Ha, adoption." Ted furrowed his brow. "Generally speaking, stepchildren remain just that, stepchildren. To act as a real parent, the only way is to adopt them legally. Without doing that, you can't have parental rights, and the child won't be legally recognized as yours. Of course, socially, they may be seen as your children, but there's no legal binding. A step-parent has no legal obligations, and a stepchild has no rights to the parent's inheritance. I explained to Ted, I didn't adopt kin when I married you. That's why I can't take kin with me. Hold on, so does that mean I have to take care of kin? That seems to be the case. Although I wouldn't say you'd be charged with parental negligence just for leaving him alone. Ken is a high school student, an age where parents are obligated to raise their children. In other words, it can be said that Ted can't just abandon him. While looking stunned, Ted pleaded with me, come on, that can't be right. What can't? I have a baby on the way, and I plan to live with my newborn and my soon-to-be wife, just the three of us. That was the condition for marrying Kay. Oh, so the woman he cheated with is named Kay. So, that has nothing to do with me. It's got everything to do with you. This could all be resolved if you just take kin. But I've told you I can't, right? Just find a way. Please don't ruin my happiness, he begged. Don't ruin his happiness. I was shocked at his audacity. After shattering our happiness, he doesn't get to demand his own happiness. With clenched teeth, I told Ted, no matter what you say, what can't be done can't be done. You should ask your girlfriend Kay. You're truly heartless. Fine, you'll regret this. Ted slammed the table and stood up. As he picked up his cell phone, he walked out of the room, making a call in the hallway. Yeah, that's right, so. I could hear his voice. Eventually, Ted came back and said to me, just wait. I'm bringing Kay over. What? You're bringing her here? Of course, because you're refusing to budge. I have no other choice. For some reason, Ted shouted angrily, seeming to believe he wasn't in the wrong. Well, we still have to discuss the division of property. And this might make things easier. With that thought, I quietly watched Ted leave. About an hour had passed since Ted left the house. He returned, bringing a woman with him. As I stole a glance at her, she greeted with a look of discontent. Ah, hi! She didn't even attempt to meet my gaze. I could somewhat understand her feelings. Meeting the spouse of the person you're having an affair with, no matter how you think of it, cannot be a pleasant experience. Regardless, Kay turned out to be the woman who had been in Ted's car that day. I can't deny thinking it's all because of this woman, but thanks to her, I can bring Ted down to his lowest. With that thought, a smile naturally spilled onto my face. How should I start the conversation? While I was considering this, Kay spoke up first. You're Milo, right? Don't you think your child is adorable? You've lived together for about 13 years, haven't you? Are you talking about Ken? If so, I do think he's adorable. I consider him as much my child as if he were my own. Then why are you abandoning him? You should take him with you. I stared at Kay, sweat beginning to bead on her forehead. I knew it. She condemns me with her words, but she doesn't truly mean it. I recalled the results of the investigation into Ted's conduct. If the current situation described there about Ken is true, it makes sense why she would argue like this. So, I decided to shake them up. I'd love to take him with me, but no matter how adorable he is and no matter how much I love him, legally only Ted is Ken's parent. I can't become Ken's parent. But yes, there's also the option of not getting a divorce, and you need to raise your child by yourself. Upon hearing this, Kay flinched. She then turned to Ted and said, I can't raise a baby on my own. Don't worry, I'll take care of our child. Besides, I'm definitely getting a divorce, and I want to be with you. At that point, I interrupted. What are you talking about? It hasn't been decided whether we're getting a divorce yet. Shut up. I'm definitely getting a divorce, so you're taking Ken with you. We're gonna discuss that later. We're getting nowhere. Okay, what do you think? I turned the conversation over to Kay. She made a pout and said, I can't raise someone else's child, even if it's the child of the man you love. Course not. I love Ted, not some child of Ted and another woman. Oh, I see. But isn't your argument a bit strange? Why do you want to raise someone else's child? That's your personal opinion, and I won't blame you for it. But you're okay with making Ted raise another person's child, right? As soon as I said that, Kay's face turned suddenly pale. At the same time, Ted tilted his head, questioning, "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the baby, Kay's baby in her belly. This child is mine. I told you that before." While Ted seemed puzzled, I continued, "You did say that, but it's odd. According to what I investigated, the father of Kay's child should be another man." As soon as I broke the news, Ted turned to Kay. With her face pale, Kay looked down, and Ted stared at her. The whole scene was so ridiculous that I nearly burst into laughter. Ted interrogated Kay, asking if what I said was true. Kay banged on the table, arguing back, "Don't be stupid. The father of this child is you, Ted." But I calmly told her, "That's not true. I have proof. Look." Saying this, I laid out a single photo on the table, an image obtained through a private investigation. The picture showed Kay and an unknown man talking in front of an obstetrician's office. With a private investigation, they also checked if she was cheating. According to that, she had a man she was seeing, and the child in her belly was his. Kay started to stutter, unable to speak. Seeing her like this, Ted seemed to have understood everything, collapsing in despair. "That's why you should divorce me and raise the child together," I suggested. "Well, Ted, you'll be raising someone else's child. But okay, you're okay with that, right?" "No, no way. Don't forget about Ken, okay?" Ted pleaded. "Wait, let's get back together, Mela. If I break up with her, you won't divorce, right?" "What? You're saying whatever suits you. Sorry, but I was also planning to divorce, so this comes at the right time. And I'll claim a hefty division of property." Saying so, I slammed the evidence of their cheating on the table, photos of the two of them cheating, including Kay and the unknown man. Ted picked up one of the photos and shouted at Kay, "This lying woman. It's all ruined because of you." "That's my line." "You should have thought I would prefer a younger man," Kay retorted. Suddenly, Ted and Kay started fighting amongst themselves. Fed up, I said, "Take your fight somewhere else," and kicked them out of the house. After that, I went to Ken's room, gently knocking on the door. Ken peeked out. "I'm sorry. You heard the conversation, didn't you?" "Well, yeah, but that was all on my dad. It's not like it's your fault or anything. But I'm totally fine, really. I'll be a college student next year, and I'll make my dad pay for the move and then do whatever I want." Ken flashed a slight smile, seeming more mature than I had thought. I was relieved to see my son's growth. However, his father, Ted, has not matured at all. No matter how many times I tried to contact him, he stopped answering my calls. Even after a few days had passed, the situation remained unchanged. The divorce negotiations wouldn't proceed like this, and he doesn't seem to be coming home either. Troubled, I decided to go to Ted's company, but showing up suddenly might just be a nuisance. So I contacted Ted's boss, Mr. Wilson, before heading to his company. When I arrived at the company, Mr. Wilson promptly attended to me and summoned Ted to his office. At the same time, he also called for Kay. With the two of them in front of me, I addressed Ted. "You know why I'm here, right?" "What's it?" "Because you won't cooperate with the divorce discussions. How much longer do you intend to avoid addressing this?" I asserted with conviction, but Ted simply shrugged in response. On the contrary, Kay remained silent since her arrival. "You seem anxious that your boyfriend will discover your affair with Ted, don't you, Kay?" I remarked, smirking. She appeared disheartened, as it seemed her true love also worked in the same company. It was only a matter of time before Kay's infidelity was laid bare. Ted resisted cooperation with the divorce discussions until the very end. However, after a stern reprimand from Mr. Wilson, he reluctantly agreed to participate. "Well, I'll be heading home now," I announced, and Ted expressed his dissatisfaction. "Showing up at my workplace? Are you kidding me? If this tarnishes my reputation, what will you do? You're the one at fault, not me. Besides, an affair won't get you fired. In fact, you can't be fired for having an affair." Ted argued, but I was indifferent. "It's not my concern. I came to discuss the divorce. Whether you quit your job or not is not my problem. The same goes for Kay. Well, do your best," I retorted, leaving Ted and Kay at the office. Later, through my lawyer, I successfully secured the division of property from Ted. However, according to Vice Mr. Wilson, complications arose after my departure from his office. The news of their affairs spread rapidly throughout the company, leading to a chain of events. Kay's boyfriend learned about the affair, and they had a significant argument, resulting in an immediate breakup. Enraged by the breakup, Kay demanded compensation from Ted for mental abuse. Naturally, Ted contested her claims, leading to a messy court battle. With the affair becoming public knowledge and court proceedings underway, both Ted and Kay had to leave the company. Ted struggled to find new employment, partly due to his age, and ended up working part-time at a local shop. Kay, pregnant and seeking refuge, retreated to her parents' house. Their lives became entangled in the complexities of the court case, and their reputations suffered. On the flip side, my life was on an upward trajectory. My boss suggested my return as a full-time employee, and I am now diligently working in that capacity. My relationship with Ken, who is focused on college preparations, is thriving. He even introduced me to his girlfriend, expressing his respect for me as a parent despite Ted being his father. Although I am no longer officially his mother, he appreciates my support during this crucial time.
Hi, I'm Emma Clark, and I grew up in the small town of Harrow. It's nothing glamorous, just a place where everyone knows each other and secrets have a way of coming to light. After graduating, I dove straight into the retail world, specifically lingerie. To me, it wasn't just a job, it was my passion. I poured my heart and soul into my work, and eventually, I became the proud owner of a chain of lingerie stores ranging from quaint boutiques to upscale outlets. I was dedicated to my business and exceptionally good at it. But as I clocked in the hours, days, and months, I started to feel like something was missing. That's when Michael entered my life. It all began with a simple ping on my phone. A friend request from a sharply dressed guy with piercing eyes. I didn't recognize him, but his profile hinted at a man who had his life together. A lawyer, hence the tailored suit. Curiosity got the best of me and I hit accept. It wasn't long before his first message appeared one evening while I was crunching numbers. Hey Emma, thanks for accepting my request. I noticed we have some friends in common. How's it going? Simple enough, right? But it was his follow-up messages that truly drew me in. He was witty and had a knack for making me laugh even after the longest days. I remember one night we were joking about the worst pickup lines we'd ever heard, and his humor just clicked with me. Michael, have you ever heard this one? Are you a magician? Because whenever I look at you, everyone else disappears. I bet you've heard that one in your line of work, Emma. Oh, for sure, top of the cringe chart. But here's mine. Are you a photographer? Because I really want to leave this shoot. He tacked out a laugh. At least I hoped it was genuine. After a few weeks of messaging, he suggested meeting for coffee to put a real face to the texts. The first time we met was at this little dive I loved, known for its strong brews. He was already there when I walked in, absorbed in a newspaper. When he looked up, the polished image from his profile didn't do him justice. He was even better in person. Emma, wow, you actually look like your pictures. That's a rarity in this city, he said, and I couldn't help but smile. Thanks. I think you look pretty great yourself. Despite his lawyer vibe, he laughed, and the ice melted away instantly. We talked for hours. There was substance to our conversation. Michael asked about my business and my dreams, genuinely listening to my every word. When we had been seeing each other for a year, he decided it was time to take our relationship to the next level. I was closing up shop one chilly evening when he arrived unexpectedly, his breath visible in the cold air as he presented me with a small velvet box. Emma, I've been thinking, he started, looking uncharacteristically nervous. We've been doing so well, you and I think it's time we considered making this permanent. I froze, the keys to my store still in my hand. Michael, are you saying what I think you're saying? His charming, lopsided grin appeared. Yes, I am. Marry me, Emma. Let's not play games anymore. I want you as my partner for life. My heart raced, and a whirlwind of thoughts flooded my mind. Was I ready for marriage? But looking into his eyes and seeing the sincerity there made me feel like it was right. Yes, I breathed. I'll marry you. Then, his expression shifted to something more serious. But there's something else we need to discuss. Some legal matters. The word legal hit me like a splash of ice water. Legal? Really, Michael? Is that necessary? He rushed to explain, taking my trembling hands in his. It's not that I don't trust you, Emma. It's just practical. As a lawyer, I've seen too many messy splits not to be cautious. Plus, it'll protect us both. What kind of protection are we talking about? I asked, a mix of curiosity and concern coloring my voice. He pulled out some documents from his briefcase. It's straightforward. If either of us cheats, the cheater loses their assets to the other. It's simple and fair. You know I would never cheat on you, Emma. This is just a safety net. I took a deep breath, trying to wrap my head around it all. The romantic proposal suddenly tangled with talk of cheating and assets wasn't what I had envisioned for my engagement. But maybe life with Michael wouldn't be ordinary, and perhaps this was just part of that. I glanced at the papers and then back at him, sensing his earnestness. All right, I'll think about it, but let me be clear, Michael. I have no intention of giving you a reason to use this against me. His relief was palpable. We celebrated that night, and despite the strange mix of emotions, the evening was perfect. The restaurant was cozy, the food delicious, and Michael was attentive, making me laugh and helping me forget about the legalities for a few hours. As we strolled back to the car beneath the stars, he stopped and pulled me close. You know I love you, right? No piece of paper is going to change that. I nodded, resting my head against his chest. I know, Michael. I love you too, I replied softly, but let's make sure this prenuptial agreement doesn't come between us, okay? He pressed a gentle kiss to the top of my head. It won't, I promise. A few days later, I signed the prenuptial agreement after reviewing it with my own lawyer, just to be sure. It felt strange to sign a document discussing the potential end of a marriage when ours hadn't even begun. But life is a gamble, and I was all in. I just hoped my bet on Michael would pay off. We were the couple everyone envied, always laughing and whispering to each other at parties. But after a few months, I sensed something shifting. At first, it was subtle, just a chill that settled over us, but soon enough, real trouble emerged. One afternoon, while shopping for new scents at a perfume store, I struck up a casual conversation with a sales associate about fragrances. When we left the store, Michael was fuming. Who was that? He barked as soon as we were clear of the crowded mall. I was taken aback. The sales guy. I was just asking about the perfumes. Why did it seem like you were really into him? Michael shot back, his eyes narrowing. I stared at him in disbelief. Michael, I was talking about perfumes. What's gotten into you? He scoffed, shaking his head and turning to walk away. Nothing. Forget it. Let's just go home. But it didn't end there. It only escalated. From that moment on, whenever I spoke to another man, Michael would sulk or make snide remarks. He became distant, retreating behind his laptop or phone and leaving me to eat dinner alone most nights. One evening, I couldn't take it anymore. I found him in his study, staring blankly at a spreadsheet. Michael, we need to talk, I said, standing in the doorway. He didn't look up. It's about us, about how you've been acting lately. I walked over to shut his laptop. You've been distant, and every time I interact with another guy, you act like I've committed some crime. He rubbed his temples and sighed heavily. Emma, you don't understand the pressure I'm under at work. When I see you laughing and chatting with other men, it just gets to me. Sometimes it feels like you don't respect our relationship enough to keep your distance. We stared at each other, the air thick with unspoken words and the remnants of our raised voices. Then the rumors started creeping in. Friends began whispering that Michael had been telling people I was a flirt, chatting up other men whenever he turned his back. I couldn't believe it. You've been talking about me behind my back? I demanded, telling people I flirt with other guys. Look, Emma, it's not like that. I might have said a few things, but it's only because I see how they look at you, he replied, defensive. I cut him off, my anger boiling over. I don't believe this. You have no right to spread lies about me. You're supposed to be my partner, not my biggest critic. After that blow-up, things between us cooled down. One morning, I found a note from Michael on the kitchen counter. His handwriting, usually neat and precise, looked rushed this time. I picked up the note, my heart racing a bit faster than usual. Emma, let's try to start over. Meet me at the Grand View Hotel, room 204, at 8 p.m. tonight. Let's put the past behind us and move forward. I stared at the note for a full minute, taken aback. This was unexpected. Maybe it was his way of reaching out, trying to mend what had been broken. Hope fluttered in my chest like a fragile bird, and I decided to go. The day dragged on, and work felt like a blur. I couldn't focus on customer orders or inventory. My mind kept drifting back to the note and what the evening might hold. Could we really start fresh? By the time I closed up the shop and headed to the hotel, I was a bundle of nerves. Arriving at the Grand View, my palms were sweaty. I checked my reflection in the car mirror, fixing my hair and dabbing on a bit of lipstick. Not too much. I didn't want to seem like I was trying too hard. Room 204 was on the second floor. The hallway was quiet, just the soft hum of the air conditioning. I knocked on the door. No answer. I knocked again, then hesitantly turned the doorknob. It was unlocked. The room was dimly lit by a bedside lamp, casting long shadows across the bed. An open bottle of wine sat on the table, 2 glasses beside it, and a small plate of sliced fruit. But there was no sign of Michael. Michael, I called out as I stepped inside, letting the door click shut behind me. Silence enveloped me, broken only by the soft whir of the air conditioner. I considered leaving, but something made me stay. I poured myself a glass of wine, the deep red liquid swirling in the glass. Just one glass, I muttered to myself, hoping to calm my nerves. I took a sip. The wine was rich and slightly too sweet. I sat down on the edge of the bed, my mind racing. The wine began to make my head feel a little fuzzy, or was that just my nerves? I lay back to rest my eyes for a moment, the room spinning gently before everything faded to black. When I finally woke up, it was dark outside. I tried to sit up, but a pounding headache made it difficult, and my thoughts were foggy. My phone lay on the nightstand, and I grabbed it. The light from the screen was blinding in the dim room. I checked the time. It was past midnight. Panic clawed at my chest as I struggled to remember what had happened and how I ended up lying there, but it felt like grasping at smoke. I jolted awake, suddenly aware that I was lying there without any clothes. Panic surged through me as I fumbled to dial Michael's number, my fingers trembling. When he picked up, his voice was cold and distant. "Emma, what's up?" "Michael, where are you? Why didn't you come to the hotel?" My voice shook with a mix of anxiety and frustration. "Hotel? What are you talking about? Emma, are you drunk? Have you lost your mind? I'm at the Grand View, like you told me. Why did you ask me to come here if you weren't going to show up?" My anger flared, drowning out my confusion. "Emma, I don't know what sick game you're playing, but I didn't write any note. I've been home all night. You're out of control, running around with your lovers." As I drove home from that disastrous night, Michael's cold, dismissive voice replayed in my head, leaving me in a state of turmoil. It felt like I was trapped in a nightmare from which I couldn't wake. Pulling into the driveway, the familiar sights of our home offered no comfort. Instead, they twisted into a knot of dread in my stomach. I stepped inside, and the tension hit me like a wave. Michael was pacing the living room, his face twisted in anger. As soon as he saw me, he exploded. "There you are, the wandering wife returns," he yelled, his voice dripping with scorn. "Michael, please, we need to talk. Something very wrong happened tonight," I pleaded, my voice shaky yet desperate to make him understand. But he wouldn't listen. Instead, he slammed a stack of photos on the table. "Explain these," he shouted. I picked up the photos, my hands trembling. They showed me in a hotel room, in bed with a man I'd never seen before. My heart sank. "Michael, I don't know who this is. I swear I've never seen him before. Something happened to me tonight, something I can't explain." He laughed, a harsh, mocking sound that sent shivers down my spine. "A monstrous mistake or just your monstrous behavior? Marrying you was the real mistake." Tears stung my eyes, but I fought them back, desperate to stay strong and clear-headed. "I didn't do this, Michael. You have to believe me." "Believe you? Why should I? You're a liar and a cheat, and I'll make sure you don't get a cent from me. I'm going to court, and I will take everything from you, just like we agreed." He spat out the words before grabbing his suitcase, already packed, and heading for the door. With a final glare, he slammed the door behind him, leaving me alone in the echoing silence of the house. I collapsed onto the couch, my body shaking. The pain in my head throbbed relentlessly, an intensity that made it hard to think. But it was more than just a headache. It felt as if my brain were shrouded in fog, my memories of the night blurred and inconsistent. That's when it hit me, the wine. I had only had one glass, but the dizziness and blackout didn't add up. It was too extreme, too sudden. I grabbed my phone and dialed my friend Lisa, a nurse, hoping she could help explain my symptoms. "Lisa, something's not right. I had a glass of wine, and then everything went black. I woke up hours later, and now Michael has these photos. It doesn't add up." My words tumbled out in a rush. There was a pause on the other end as Lisa processed what I said. "Emma, it sounds like you might have been drugged. You need to get to a hospital or a lab and get tested right now. Tell them what happened, especially about the wine and your symptoms." The drive to the lab felt like a blur as my thoughts raced, desperately trying to piece everything together. Once there, I explained the situation to the technician, who nodded solemnly and took several vials of blood. A couple of days later, I heard a heavy thud at my doorstep. It was a letter from Michael. My hands shook as I tore it open, confirming my worst fears in the cold, formal language of the legal notice. Michael was suing me for infidelity, aiming to strip me of everything I owned based on our prenuptial agreement. The trial was set for a month from now. I called my lawyer, Paul, immediately. His voice offered a small comfort amid the chaos. "Emma, come to my office. We need to strategize." As I drove to his office, my mind raced through every possible scenario, except the one where I emerged unscathed. Upon arriving, I noticed a familiar figure, Michael, walking alongside a young man, the same one from the photos. Without thinking, I grabbed my phone and started recording. I caught them exchanging an envelope, which the young man quickly tucked into his jacket. My heart raced as I realized the significance of what I might have just captured. At Paul's office, I showed him the video. His eyebrows shot up as he watched the exchange. "This is good, Emma. It looks very suspicious. I think it's time we brought in a private investigator." Paul's friend, Jack, a seasoned private investigator, took the case. He moved quickly, tailing the young actor and digging into his background. A few days later, Jack called us into his office with news. I spoke to the kid, he began, his expression serious. "He's a bit of an actor, down on his luck. Your husband hired him to play a part, the part of your lover. He also confessed that your husband planned everything, even the drugged wine." As we were talking, my phone pinged with an email. My blood test results had arrived. I opened the attachment, my breath catching as I read the findings. Positive for a potent sedative. Just as Jack had said. I passed my phone to Paul, who read the results and looked up, his eyes hardening with resolve. "This is it, Emma. This is what we need. With this evidence, we can not only defend you, but also turn the tables on Michael." Paul advised me to keep everything under wraps until the court date. "Let's not tip him off. We'll hit him with this in court and give him the surprise of his life." A week had passed since the hotel debacle, and I was back in the familiar confines of my lingerie store, trying to distract myself from the looming court date. It was an ordinary afternoon until Michael walked in, a woman on his arm. "Emma, meet Leela, my bride-to-be," he announced, pride in his voice that didn't quite reach his eyes. Leela looked young, too young, perhaps, to grasp the type of man she was dealing with. She glanced at me with a mix of curiosity and judgment. Michael wasted no time stirring up trouble. "Take a good look around, Emma. Soon enough, all this will be mine." His arm swept dramatically across the expanse of my store, a smirk playing on his lips. Leela's eyes followed his gesture, her expression hardening with newfound conviction. I wanted to reach out and warn her, but I recalled Paul's strict instructions to remain silent until the hearing. All I could manage was a thin smile, responding with as much dignity as I could muster. "We'll see what the judge has to say about that, Michael." The day of the court session arrived all too quickly. The courtroom felt austere, the air thick with tension. Michael, ever the lawyer, had chosen to represent himself. He stood before us, adjusting his tie, a clear display of self-assurance, as he prepared to deliver his opening statement. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice steady and clear, "today you will see the true colors of a woman who not only broke the vows of marriage but sought to destroy the sanctity of our home with her deceit." He gestured dramatically to the evidence displayed on the screen behind him. My wife, Emma, was not the faithful partner she promised to be. Photos from the hotel room flashed on the screen, eliciting murmurs from the courtroom. For months, I lived in torment, suspecting her infidelities, and finally, as these pictures show, my worst fears were confirmed. He paused, allowing the weight of his words to settle as he walked closer to where I sat, his eyes locking onto mine. Emma here would have you believe she's a victim, innocent and caught in circumstances beyond her control. His tone was scathing, his words rehearsed yet effective. But I tell you, she is not a victim. She is a perpetrator, a destroyer of our union. As he spoke, I noted the calculated pauses and measured glances at the judge, the way he constructed each sentence with the precision of a seasoned attorney. The evidence is clear, undeniable. Emma's actions have caused irreparable damage, not just to her marriage but to the very fabric of trust that binds any relationship. His speech crescendoed in a dramatic plea for justice. Paul, my lawyer, rose to address the court with calm authority, his briefcase filled with the evidence that would clear my name. Your Honor, he began, his voice steady and commanding, today we not only defend Emma Clark's honor but also reveal a pattern of deceit orchestrated by her husband, Michael Clark. He gestured to the back of the courtroom, and the actor Michael had hired entered, causing a stir among the spectators. Paul asked him to share his involvement, and the young man looked nervously around before speaking. I was hired to act a part. I thought it was just a prank, he admitted, his voice shaky. I didn't realize the seriousness of what was being orchestrated. Paul nodded gravely, then presented the blood test results to the court. These results show that Emma was incapacitated against her will, drugged by substances she had no knowledge of consuming. The courtroom murmured as the implications sank in. Furthermore, Paul continued, his tone hardening, this is not the first time Mr. Clark has employed such tactics. He laid out evidence of Michael's previous marriages, detailing how similar patterns had led to his unjust enrichment at the expense of his former wives. As Paul concluded his arguments, the weight of the evidence was palpable. We asked not only for the dismissal of the fraudulent claims made against Emma, but also for just compensation for the ordeal she has endured. The judge nodded, absorbing everything before delivering her verdict. After careful consideration of the evidence presented, I find in favor of Emma Clark. The prenuptial agreement is hereby annulled. Relief washed over me, and tears pricked my eyes, not just from the victory, but from the vindication. Furthermore, the judge added, the court awards Mrs. Clark damages in the amount of $400,000. Michael's face turned ashen, his future crumbling before him. His fiancée, present in the courtroom, hurried out, only to return briefly to whisper a thank you to me for exposing the truth before leaving him for good. News of the trial spread like wildfire, the sensational details making headlines. Michael's professional reputation was irrevocably damaged. He was stripped of his license to practice law. The revelation prompted his ex-wives to file lawsuits against him, uncovering a trail of deceit that left him financially and socially bankrupt. As I closed up shop one evening, the glow of the sunset casting long shadows on the floor, I reflected on the journey. The battle had been hard-fought, marked by moments of despair and indignity, but ultimately it stood as a testament to resilience and justice.